recording. There we go, recording. Hello. This is the David the Dog Trainer podcast number 9.
Number 9.
We're 9 in. We have 2 special guests here. Emily, who's been on it numerous times but hasn't listened to it yet. And
Oh my gosh.
Called out.
Oh.
Called out.
and Bridget, who's never been on it but has listened to it.
Hello.
Hi, Bridget.
Hi.
Bridget, I feel like because I talk about you a lot on this I don't know how that makes you feel, but since
We do talk about Bridget a lot.
I feel like your name comes up basically every single episode,
Really?
only because of the fact that you have a lot of little dogs, and I use your dogs as examples a lot.
Yeah, good.
So,
In good ways.
Good examples, yeah.
but I've had like numerous people request that you be on this
Oh, really?
podcast. Well, I tried to tell you the other day.
Yeah.
Matt, the guy that was here, he was like, "Man, you got to get her on. You got to get
Yeah.
her on." Mostly because I feel like a lot of trainers just have such a pain in the ass time with little dogs. And since you have like really assumed it as your role of having lots of little dogs and having them all be like very well mannered and behaved.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
love
like,
the little dogs.
is this a fantasy? Is this real? Does it actually exist?
It's my favorite. They're my favorite.
They're the best. What's new, everybody? Josh? Anything since yesterday from
No.
the last one?
Not much has changed. Today's already going off way better than yesterday.
We fixed every technical difficulty we had yesterday.
Thank God.
Everybody was on time today,
Yes.
and we're filming. It's 10:22, which is pretty good. So we got all the time in the world. Emily, anything new?
Just recovering from...
Living the life.
Yeah. Just living life.
The life.
So you had a root canal?
Oh, man, just called out today.
Is that a call out, though?
No, we
I
want to
don't
hear
know. I
it.
had an infected root canal, apparently, which
Ow.
I guess that can happen for no reason. They say I do floss, but
Good, because I don't.
you should. No one wants to go through that. Yeah, I had oral surgery kind of like out of the blue the other day. So I'm just sitting at home and eating soup, which soup is not filling. So I'm starving right now.
You eating a lot of ice cream?
Yes.
Isn't that the one thing they like tell you it's okay? I remember when
Yeah.
I had braces, anytime I would get a braces adjustment, they would be like, "Oh, you could just have ice cream." I
Yeah.
was like, "Hell yeah."
The pistachio gelato from how do you say it?
Talenti.
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 Oh my gosh, that has been my go-to.
That's expensive.
So you're kind of a trooper right now. You're on a podcast right after
Yeah.
oral surgery.
800 milligrams of Motrin getting me through.
Hell yes. That pistachio shit is so good. I remember when I went to Italy a couple of years ago, like pistachio gelato is like the signature flavor out there. And it was so unbelievable. And nothing in a carton like tastes anywhere near as good as it did.
He just had to
I can imagine.
throw it in our faces when I went to Italy.
I think that was like 2017. Probably.
Yeah. Like the place where gelato was made.
Yeah, it was good times. Bridget, what's new?
Just down a dog, not because it died.
Oh, jeez. God.
So
I was like,
And maybe I should have opened different.
down a dog.
Down a dog. I got rid of one. Not
Got rid of it.
One of my fosters went back to his original owner.
His original owner?
Yes.
What's the story behind that?
Apparently, some shit went down. The husband gave the dog away without the wife's consent, and the dog was missing. And they found it through the rescue that he's at, and he just went back yesterday. I've had him for like 2 months.
Wait, they're still together over that? Because I feel
No,
like that
no,
would.
no,
I was gonna say,
absolutely not.
like Jesus.
I would hire a hitman.
That's a deal
if
breaker.
somebody stole my dog.
Yeah. Can you even imagine like coming home and like having one of your dogs just gone and like
Yeah.
your significant other just being like, "I gave it away."
Oh, he'd be
like-
dead.
you're like, Spork is no longer with us.
my
and you would be
God.
like,
Murder.
Justin, pay attention. Don't ever try to get rid of my dog.
you
or
do
else
not
she'll
get rid of any
have a
little
hitman
dog.
That's
out
what I
on
told
you.
him.
That's cool. How long did you have the dog for? I feel like I didn't see this one for very long. About it.
2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
He was a little shit.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but we ended well.
Was this through
did
the rescue that you were the same rescue that you kind of work with?
Impossible Mutts.
Very cool. Very cool. So are you going to be getting another one soon then to replace? So what does that bring you down
Probably.
to now? Like
I'm
5?
6.
6?
So I had 7. It was way too much. It was a very stressful time. So even having that one less dog has just already changed so much.
That's, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, how long is that going to last?
It doesn't last long.
I was gonna
Because I'm
say.
like, I like this rest, and then my brain is like, you have to get another dog. Do it.
what do you feel like the dynamic, so we're going to get into like, obviously, like you've been involved in a lot of different dog things, like over the course of your life, obviously. You used to have GSPs, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how many did you have like at one time?
My uncle bred them and raised them, sold them like responsibly, obviously.
Sure.
So I lived out with him for a while he was raising them. We had like 7 to 8.
Wow. Was
and
that on like a farm style property though?
Colorado, out in Colorado in a farm.
Yep.
It was like he had a whole kennel. It was nice. And then litters of puppies every year. Mm-hmm. So we would raise them, and that was a fun time.
Have you personally ever had like larger dogs?
Yes, I grew up with just large dogs. I've never had a little dog. Hated little dogs. Like, absolutely not. Chihuahuas disgust me. And then
Look at you now.
walked in Nelson.
Walked in Nelson.
Oh, it was Nelson, huh?
Little Nelly
It's
boy.
Nelson.
Okay, so what's the dynamic difference between having, say, like 6 or 7 little dogs versus like a bunch of big dogs? Like, what's the do you feel like there's a difference in the things that you do with them? You know, how you're able to manage that situation, stuff like that.
Yeah, like Doof was over at my house the other day for like overnight, and he was like a bull in a china shop.
Yes.
Knocked all the shampoo bottles into my bathtub, followed me everywhere. He's just like, his presence is just so big. He was a good dog. Like, he's well trained and he's great. But like, my little dogs just like tiptoe around, and like they're just take up less space. So it is less work, I would say. But the big dogs, like when I had big dogs, growing up, my house was like such a mess, and dogs were running everywhere, wreaking havoc. So
I mean, you figure even like do your dogs like shed a lot?
yeah.
But it's still such a small amount of hair, which is crazy to even think about. Like, I know, like having had like 4 dogs in my house at one time, and all being like over 55 pounds, whatever, like not the biggest dogs in the world, but definitely not small. Like, there are things that I like, how I have this upstairs setup where I have like delicate things on shelves and stuff. Like, I could never do that in my living areas, not because my dogs are poorly behaved, but if they just got excited and ran too fast into a room, they were going to knock something over, right? I see people, like, I'll go into people's houses and they'll have like pedestals with like pieces of artwork on top of them and stuff, and I'm just like, what a fantasy that seems like, where it's like, if Sport gets the zoomies and runs around your house, like, he's not really gonna knock anything over.
No.
So that's such a difference. Like, and I even, like, when we were looking at houses and stuff, one big thing was like a lot of areas we liked, like the Lakewood, Detroit Shoreway, Tremont area and stuff. The houses physically were like, the rooms were too small, where if you have that many dogs in it, like, that takes up so much space. You can't even walk around, without tripping over somebody. So that's always really interesting. And the struggles, I feel like, of like big dogs versus small dogs.
She's just like,
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, Star's my only big dog, so
and big from the standpoint of like not really that big.
And he knocks my plants over all the time, and that's the biggest annoyance with him. But other than that,
okay, so Nelson was your first tiny dog.
yes.
Okay, so how did it grow from Nelson to the 6 concurrent dogs that you have now?
Nelson was found in a backyard of my neighbor, and I was pet sitting him. And after I pet sitted him, they're like, we really don't want him anymore. Like, he's terrible. He's a nightmare. And I was like, okay, I'll take him.
Like, they found him in the backyard,
Yeah. So
and they were gonna kind of keep him.
Yeah, and then he was just too terrible and like horrible behaved, biting everybody. And then I brought him home. We worked on it, and then like he was just like my little baby, and I was like, I have to have another one of these little tiny dogs.
Yeah.
And then I worked at, you worked at Summit County Humane Society. That's where I got Minnow.
Oh.
And he was a trash puppy found in a dumpster. And when I saw him, I was like, that's my dog. That's him.
Yeah.
So, and then it kind of just grew from there, because I just loved the small aspect and dressing them up and getting sweaters for them.
Yeah. So you kind of got these dogs, you kind of rescued them.
Yeah.
So is that how you kind of got involved with the foster system and such? You just kind of felt compelled?
Yeah. I worked at the APL for like 6 months, and when I left rescue, I felt really guilty. Like my life's purpose is to be rescuing dogs.
Okay.
So I was like, how can I still be involved in rescue but not do it for my life's work? Because it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
And then fostering was the solution to that. So I fostered with the APL and then found a new rescue to foster with.
That is a really great way to look at it. I feel like you know, like working in, like, I've never worked in a shelter or anything, obviously, but it seems like such a like chaotic, like
so
just
Yeah.
rough environment. I feel like all the people I know that work heavily in rescue or shelters or stuff, like they're just like, they look just so like beat down all the time.
Exhausting.
You know?
And they do like literal God's work. Like,
Yeah.
They do so much.
Yeah, which is super cool. But I feel like, you know, like being able to like then go out and say like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like how can I not work in that environment? That would probably have like, aside from like the emotional aspect of it, very little payoff and like being able to support like your life and
Yeah.
stuff, but still be able to provide where you can. And like fostering is the next best thing, if not like one of the best ways that you can handle stuff like that, right? Like being able to, like we talk a lot about like, you know, dogs in shelter environments and how it's like virtually impossible to get them to like a stable place when they're physically in that shelter,
Exactly.
you know, because it's just such a chaotic environment. And they need that like long term, like we're going out into a house, we're learning rules, we're learning how to exist in a family, we're learning how to get along with other dogs and stuff like that. And, you know, I would assume that you see those dogs that like go through like your like foster program that you have and, you know, then rehome them out. I would assume you see such a higher level of success because of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, how does that get you into the training world? I like to see the correlation here. So,
Well, let's do this. So instead of bouncing back and forth like that, how about you just like walk us through your introduction to dogs? Because Emily's done this when she came on the first time. Chris has done this for the first time. You have, like I said, like a fairly extensive history in working with dogs in different like avenues. So I'm interested to see the progression from like where you started to like now working at a training facility and being a trainer and fostering and training those dogs as well.
Yeah. I always grew up with dogs, so I love them. I've always had multiples. So my mom kind of just instilled that craziness into me. I've worked in shelters the last 5 years maybe, but grew up around dogs. My uncle raised those pointers, and we like tested them for hunting competitions, like
field trialing and stuff.
Yeah, so I did that with my first dog, Rainey, who's a GSP. And now she's an old lady. And then I moved to Ohio and could not find a job in wildlife biology, which is my degree.
Did you move here for school?
Yeah.
For OU, right?
Yeah, I went to OU, and then I permanently moved here in 2017. And there was no jobs paying well for wildlife. So it was all in the dog world. So I immersed myself in the Humane Society of Summit County where Emily worked. We didn't work there at the same time. And then I met this girl, Tristan, who's amazing and does a lot of rescue. So she kind of inspired me to do fostering.
Yep.
And then we moved out to Lakewood and found a job at the APL. Did fostering through them and worked through them. And I just really enjoyed having fosters in my house. And I failed a bunch and kept a bunch of them.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah, it did. It was like...
Was it like over the course of like when you started working for us? Because I feel like you only had like 3 at one point.
3, and then before I knew it, like I had 5, and I was like, "What is my life?" Like, but I just like they come into your home, and then I can realize like through training, I was able to manage them so well that I was like, "Why not keep you?" Like, who else is going to want you? Which is a toxic mindset, because you can always find somebody if you look hard enough that's going to want that dog.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen situations where there's been dogs that I've seen, whether in rescues I've worked with or shelters I've worked with, where I was like, Jesus Christ, like this dog is not going to be successful, right? For whatever reason, whether behaviorally or not, right? And they wind up getting placed in that like perfect home, and it works out really well. Like Sterling was one of those dogs that I really thought was going to have a hard time going into a new house. And Yeah, I mean, he was like very dog aggressive, and he had, you know, a lot of reactivity issues that were not just like reactivity. They were reactivity where he would turn around and try to nail you, like redirected and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you know?
that's true.
And he wasn't like unfortunately, like though his fosters were great people, like they had too much going on in their house to be able to provide the environment he needed. So it was just a situation where I felt like he was like spiraling, right? And he wound up finding the perfect situation to go into, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's doing great with him, right?
He lives in Akron, by the way. And
Does he?
They come into the pet store that I work
Oh, that's cool.
part-time at.
Nice.
Yeah. He came in. I was like, Sterling? Yeah. And then she was like, you know my dog? I was like, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
that'd
yeah,
make
he's
my
doing
day.
really, really good.
What a good
He gained a little weight because he's happy.
Naturally.
A little happy weight, but yeah, he's
Little
doing
happy weight.
good. So I can
I
add
understand
to that.
that.
Yeah. So I can add that he's doing very well. So
Good.
That's cool. Another one was what was the dog's name? Fuck. I'm gonna remember it in a minute. I probably won't remember it. You would know this dog. God, Chuckles.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Chuckles.
Yep.
Were you guys here with Chuckles?
I'm at Chuckles.
Yeah. So Chuckles was another one that was in a very similar situation to Sterling, where he was with a very long-term foster, Greg, and Greg was a wonderful, wonderful guy, but Chuckles had dog aggression issues. Chuckles had reactivity issues and stuff, and you know, same deal. Like he was, like his owner or his foster was trying his hardest to like provide we could and like take him for as many walks as he could and do stuff, but they had other dogs in the house he couldn't commingle with, and it was just a hard situation for him. And now Chuckles is living with some lady on a boat.
Oh, nice.
So you know,
Whatever
living the
works.
life.
On the
Yeah.
boat.
But yeah, like you were saying, you know, like as hard as the situations seem, like some of these fosters will just like continue to like fight for that dog and push that dog, you know, out there to try to get them the right situation, and it really winds up being an awesome situation when it actually happens. You know,
Yeah.
like there's so many people out there that are just like living that like single life in their house and are like committed to that and just want their dog buddy.
Yeah. It's frustrating to try to find the perfect home, but
Yeah.
if you just take a little time, like with the rescue I'm at now, I have that freedom to take time.
Yeah,
And pick through applications and like physically interview people and make sure it's the right fit.
that's cool.
For the
So
dog.
do you have a good like say in that situation of who will actually get the dog?
I think so, yeah. Like
That's
with
cool.
the APL, I had none. Like, so I would spend months with this dog, and then I would just take it back to the shelter, and I'd see who adopted it, and it did not seem like a good fit.
Sure.
And that was like heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So the shelter I'm at now, or the rescue I'm at now, allows me to have more of a choice and a say.
Mm-hmm.
So I met with my little foster Odie, who just went a couple weeks ago. I found a perfect family for him, and
Yep.
I just felt really good about it.
Mm-hmm. So where does like your position as a trainer now like kind of fit into that like life's purpose of rescuing, obviously, because clearly the rescuing is like the big picture, really, really important part for you, but you've also like really, you know, grown and established yourself as like a very successful trainer, not only with the little dogs, but with bigger dogs at the facility, and improved your skills with that. So where do you see that kind of fitting into that mold?
Training is a form of rescue, I would
Sure.
say.
That's a good way to look at it.
Rehabilitation. So in the shelters that I worked at, there was a huge gap, and they're very pro-positive, and that's totally fine, but it just didn't work at a shelter environment, and that was just so hard to constantly be heartbroken for dogs that you loved to be euthanized or just didn't make it. So I just found that like training, if you can train a dog and teach them new ways to look at things, and their chances of being euthanized are way less.
For sure. Are there specific things in the training world right now that are like exciting to you, like outside of the rescue aspect? Like what sorts of things like keep you really, really eager to continue like learning or, you know, expanding your knowledge on right now?
I like watching a lot of women that do dog training, and it's like pretty inspiring. Like the girl in Florida, walking dog training, I think it is. And they're just like really strong women that handle these huge dogs, and that's super inspiring. So
Sure.
I definitely want to do that and keep working on my relationships with dogs and people, and just help people create harmony in their homes, like the harmony I have in my home, because it's been so rewarding.
Yeah, for sure.
To create that. So if I can show other people how to do that, then we can get dogs out of shelters
Yep.
and into homes.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday a little bit as far as like the industry that we're in and it being so much of like the customer service industry, not necessarily the dog industry. And I remember Tim and I were talking about, when we're doing lessons and stuff, sometimes it gets so easy to, look at just training the dog from the standpoint of like, they come in for their lesson, right? We work with the dog and we teach the dog bed or place and recall and sit and down and all this kind of stuff. And like, the dog goes from point A to point B and looks like a fucking rock star, right? And then we kind of hand them the leash and we're like, okay, cool, work on that at home, right? And it's like zero time was actually spent at that point, like coaching them through things. And I'll catch myself, I think as a trainer, especially when we're working with a lot of dogs every single day, I'll catch myself like as a trainer myself, like doing lessons with people and getting like, say like 4 or 5 sessions in and, seeing the owner come in and then, like just seeing the dog still like not grasping it with them, even though the dog does so well once we go to actually do the session. And it's because I'm not spending enough time with that coaching process, right? And like sitting there and being like, okay, cool, well, I'm going to be hands off this entire session and I'm just going to explain to you what to do from this step to this step to this step to this step. Until it really seems like things are starting to click in your head. And it's really cool because, especially once we have the dog like understanding a lot of these things and knowing all of the basic commands and understanding the e-collar with them or the food or this or that. And when you could sit there and be like, okay, cool, the dog knows how to do these things. So if it's not doing it for you, it's because there is a communication related issue. You're not understanding that language well enough. And I haven't explained it to you well enough. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to coach through that process. And once they start making that correlation of why we're doing the certain things and how to do them with the appropriate timing, and you just see the dog get so much more like in tune with them over the course of like 15 minutes even. And you see their confidence just boost up so much, like feeling like they have a better grasp of the situation. I think that's the coolest part about the training to me is making those kind of breakthroughs with the owners where they truly understand it, right? When you see your client come in, and I'm sure you guys see this with the board and trains that you send home, when you see your client come in and communicate to the dog exactly how you would do it, and you're like, they get it, the dog is in tune with them, and they're seeing success because of that, right? That's always been one of my favorite parts about it, and something that I've really tried to make sure that I'm still getting that point just as clearly across. So
I feel like you and I had that moment with Shadow's people after their first thought, like Shadow was just kind of like testing them, and obviously like that first week follow up, you're always gonna have that like those things to clean up. But we went on a walk and like I just controlled the remote and she did the walking, and we were able to take that transfer the remote and just like seeing it's just so rewarding actually seeing that vibe between the dog and the owner, and just how grateful they were at the end. It was just it was like a beautiful moment.
They're so dedicated to that dog too. That dog, like they're so dedicated to keeping up on his training, and they love him. And
they listen to the podcast too. So good work, guys.
Oh, thanks. Nice. Another thing about them too is I think if you have those moments, it makes them want to like work on even the little things like bringing Shadow into daycare. Like we had like a 15-minute session with that, and it's just really nice to see people invested in the process.
Yeah. Invested in your dog.
Yeah. And I think there's like, what I see is there's like 3 different kinds of people that will come in for the lessons. And I think another interesting thing has been navigating the different types of people that come in, where I feel like we have the people that come in, actually, I guess kind of 4 types of people. We have the people that come in that clearly just like aren't really interested in doing the homework, obviously. Those are few and far between, obviously, but they exist. Then we have the people that come in that are, I'm losing my train of thought here. So then we have the ones that come in that are pleased with where they're at with things, right? So they're like, man, everything is going great, this, that, whatever. We're having success. The dog is doing much better, but I can still tell that they haven't grasped everything. They're just kind of riding that like success wave of like just post-training. Dog's doing much better, but I still don't understand how to maintain this stuff long term. Then you have the ones that come in and, like you were saying with Shadow's owners, just get it, right? They're communicating effectively and they're seeing the results. And the interesting thing to me is that middle ground one of the people that are like, wow, things are really good right now, but I can tell they still don't grasp it. Those are the ones that I really try to spend the most time with, because I know that very shortly after, if they're not fully grasping things, they're going to start to see that decline again. And I think navigating those 3 situations and understanding, like, how do I make the breakthroughs with the ones that aren't interested in doing the homework? And this is something, watching that Canine Intervention show yesterday, I want to talk about a little bit, because I saw a lot of stuff that glimpsed at that to me and how he navigated that on the show. And then obviously the middle tier ones and making sure we're just like really refining things with them. So, yeah, training's interesting.
Yeah, I find those middle ground ones interesting because obviously they're doing good in these moments. So it's like, for me, I get over eager and I just want to be like, yeah, we could be doing this, you know, and I don't want to over coach people ever.
Yeah.
But I also want them to be successful. So I think it's been just a careful process. And something I noticed you do a lot is that you'll just like, at first I thought it was kind of monotonous to just do all the same
Emily,
thing.
I don't know that word.
You would, in your first follow-up, so you would take the dogs and just do bed, and just sure. Essentially just go back to the basics. Monotonous is just doing the same thing over and over.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. That's what I was looking for.
And
my vocabulary isn't great.
And really that matters so much that because you said to me once, if you do it long enough, you're gonna see a loophole in the process. And I think that's kind of how I bridged the gap for that middle ground, is just really taking it down to the basics and not pushing them too far.
Yeah. I mean, oversimplifying things, right? And looking at like what is the one thing that they really need help with, right? When I had that guy in the other day, there's this newer trainer that's been coming in for kind of like little shadow sessions every other week or so, and he was telling me about a dog he recently started working with where, you know, he doesn't really do a ton of behavioral related stuff, but he had this small Maltese or something like that he was working with, and with a little bit older of a couple, and he's like, you know, I was trying to do all of the basic stuff I would do, the leash pressure, getting into the sits, the heeling, all that kind of stuff, and the dog was just essentially just not having it. just putting up a fight. The dog that would kind of just like pancake on the ground and not get it, and he was trying to put the dog through the training program, and he was like, man, I only signed these people up for like 4 sessions, like I don't know how I'm going to be able to kind of bridge that gap and you know, end at some place where I feel like, you know, we accomplished something and the dog is successful. And I was like, well, what did the people hire you for? Right. And he was like, well, they hired me because the dog will resource guard the furniture and like, you know, resource guard its food a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So how are we going to solve those problems? Right. Because here's the thing. If you solve those problems and you teach the owner to make those changes they need in their life and communicate a little bit more effectively as far as disciplining for some of those things and setting the structure to eliminate those problems in the first place, then who cares if you teach all of the other stuff, right? If you push all of that to the side and you look at what are the only skills I need to teach right now to solve those problems, then you're going to be able to end in a much more successful place, and the owner is going to be happy and willing to put in the work knowing it's going to solve that problem, right? And then the other side of the equation, he was like, you know, like how do I get them to like there's a lot of lifestyle changes and stuff that these owners are going to need to make, right? As far as like not letting the dog on the furniture temporarily, starting to adjust the dog's feeding schedule because it's free fed all the time, and et cetera, right? And I was like, as a trainer, especially as a new trainer, I always try to do like a give a little, take a little kind of procedure where it's like, if I'm going to ask an owner to do something that I haven't totally established that trust yet with, that I know they're not going to want to do, like not let the dog on the furniture or start cutting the food back like heavily and you know, doing these things that in their mind, they're like, why do I have to do that stuff? That's not going to adjust these problems, right? Mm-hmm. I need to show them first and foremost that I'm going to be able to gain some degree of success with their dog, right? And that could be, you know, picking one command or thing that they're struggling with and showing them that I can do this myself, right? I can get the dog to do this with me and see how much better the dog is with me, just like Joss does on Canine Intervention, where he had, what was the dog's name? The first one? Lady Macbeth, right?
The
just like he did with her. Like listen, like he didn't necessarily work miracles with that dog by any means, but he showed the owner, look, your dog can be really good with me, right? Now, how much does that actually say? Not much, but what it does is it immediately gains trust between trainer and owner, right? From there, you got to bridge the gap of showing the owner why they're doing all of the things wrong, which is where he kind of missed out in that situation. But if you could show them that and show them, look, I can get success with this dog, they're going to be like, wow, you understand things, so I'm going to follow the direction that you're giving me, right? And finding that motivation with each owner of what is the thing that's going to make them really confident that I have control over the situation is really, really important. And it's hard to do sometimes when you're in one-on-ones, obviously, because there's only so much you could do. I can't like adjust a feeding schedule over the course of like 30 minutes and get the dog to have really good food drive and make them seem like happier and stuff, right? But you got to figure out kind of that gap with it. So that was something that I noticed with him, was that, trying to find like, how do we kind of manage those things, and how do we find out what the owner is going to perceive as like successful, so that we could end in a solid spot, even if that means taking all of those normal things you would do and pushing them to the side. And diverting back then to the thing you originally said, that's why I will break things down really simply like that, because in like Pudge, when we were working with him, the reason why I just did bed over and over and over and over and over again with him was because I know that that's going to be one of the most essential commands to them working through their like reactivity issues when people come into their house, obviously. And two, because it's going to be the most easy thing that they can drill over and over and over again and get their timing as good as possible, right? Where if you try to just go through the motions and do all of like the recalls and this and that, but they don't even know how to individually isolate those commands and work on them and enforce them the way that they need to be, they're never going to be able to do it as a unit,
Yeah, that's something you and I were talking about the other day, right? Just how like those commands act, like what do those commands actually mean in their life? Like it really, all we need Pudge to do is stay on the bed. We don't need him to necessarily call off the bed in those moments. So I guess just kind of picturing what their lifestyle is, what they need from it, and then how to implement that and make them successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I kind of like how, in our board and trains, we're starting to make a little bit of a shift in the send home lessons as far as how we structure them out and how we teach the owners to do things. Because if you look at all of the drills we'll typically do, right? Recalling between beds, recalling to downstays, recalling into follow me, all that kind of stuff. If you really slow it down and look at it, it's just individual commands, right? And if you break it down in your head of like, okay, cool, we're working on a bed stay right now. We're working on a recall right now. We're working on a downstay right now. And if you separate it in your head like that, though, it becomes... It almost shifts the way that you perform the behavior with the dog, where if you just look at it like we're doing bed to bed right now, right? That when you look at it in that light, it doesn't force you to isolate those commands as you're working on bed to bed and enforce them as individual commands, which they are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the way that we discussed switching it up a little bit too, I think if we're showing them, okay, just bed, it's easier to kind of make them understand why it's so important.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree.
Because it's not, you're almost like going through the motions like come, bed, and instead of like really actually creating like a successful lifestyle for the dog.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so what I want to do here is on that exact topic, I have a question from my buddy Joe. And I'm going to have you guys answer this because I think it's an interesting one. So next topic should be, if you have a lot of trainers follow you, how you handle and structure take-home sessions. Most dogs are on point, but you get the ones that test owners and trainers during the session. I feel like we get those at some point. I think it would be good for owners to hear expectations on what could happen or potentially happen during those sessions, and what things do we do to set the dogs up for success throughout the send-home lesson to make it go as efficiently as possible. So basically, I think obviously, like, what do we do to set the dog up for success and the owner up for success? What do we do when we start seeing dogs push the owners around in those send-home lessons, and how do we work through that or manage that?
I'm like excited to answer this, but if you want to, do you want me to start?
Yeah. Listen to what you have to say, and then I'll branch off.
So I think just setting that initial tone, like right off the bat, making sure like reading the client right away, like seeing if they seem nervous, making sure they don't have any questions, and setting the exact expectation before you bring the dog in. Also kind of knowing the dog is really important for like, is this dog going to go bananas and jump a lot? Is this dog, expecting the worst, essentially, I would say, is first and foremost.
Haven't you noticed that the ones you think are going to go fucking bonkers don't go bonkers, and the ones you don't think are going to go bonkers are actually the ones that lose their mind?
Theo and Taco are perfect examples of that. Yeah.
I see that all the time. Like Hank and Quincy were that. Like, I fully expected Hank to like lose his marbles, and he did the same thing it sounded like Murphy did, where he's just like, I'm gonna lay in the middle of the room, this is fine. And Quincy went like hype.
That's so funny. So, and also explaining to the owners that I'm going to be correcting for any jumping or barking, and just to ignore them. And then also like telling them, like, obviously it's not going to be easy for you, but why it's important.
Sure.
I think explaining all of the whys so they trust you, instead of like, because sometimes you have to kind of correct them high for that stuff. So just making sure that they're not alarmed by that. Then moving forward with that, really letting the dog decompress when you bring it in. So it waits at the door, you let it go, it jumps, you're correcting for that, and then just waiting for that moment where the dog's in a calm state of mind. I think is huge. And then
explain that first 30 minutes. Like, what is that, or 20 minutes or whatever it is? Like, what does that really look like, and what is the importance of that?
So the first 20 minutes of it, I try to take things super slow. I've just started just doing bed.
But even before that, like when you first bring the dog in the room.
Oh, the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, like or 10 or however long it typically is.
While they're getting there, like...
Yeah, like right when you bring that dog in, what is the significance of that exact moment, and how do you typically handle that?
So I'll make the dog wait at the door, put him in a down, wait at the door. Okay, the dog's free to do whatever.
Sure.
I tell the owners not to look at the dog, not to acknowledge them. And we just I try to just maintain small talk while paying attention to the dog. If I see them going to pet or anything, I'll try to explain the importance of why you don't want to do that. The reason being is because you don't want to ramp up that state of mind, because it's going to make the rest of the lesson go a lot smoother. And I kind of just start to see what their expectations are of things. If they have any questions, just really try to set a good rapport in that first 20 minutes, while maintaining like the understanding that you can't interact with your dog right now.
Sure. And a lot of that just has to do with the fact that, like, you know, there's already so much contrast between owner and trainer, right? Like the owner is the one that the dog is used to doing literally anything they want with, and it getting reinforced or rewarded all the time. And the trainer is the one that typically has the relationship of structure, rules, discipline, and like a little bit of fun stuff, obviously, but like it's heavily emphasized on the structure and discipline, right? So because you already have that contrast, if you're to bring the dog in and allow the owners to just smother it with affection and kiss them and hug them and this and that, you're reinforcing that contrasted state of mind, right? And it could be so detrimental to then tell the dog, okay, you're rehearsing that crazy obnoxious state of mind that you're used to doing. Now we're going to reel you back in again. Right? And flipping back and forth between that, it's creating that on-off switch that we don't really want, because we want to find that balance and harmony of exciting things a little bit less exciting, scary things a little bit less scary, and then finding that kind of harmony in the middle, you know?
Yeah, I explain it that we're essentially revamping the relationship, so we want to set the tone right. Sure. Another thing that I think people really like is I tell people, like, because they're very disappointed, obviously, because they want to pet their dog.
Sure.
And so I'll tell people, at some point, you will be able to pet your dog in this. And because actually, if you allow that, it's a really good moment to work through.
Where do you typically allow it? Because I don't think we've ever talked about that, because I do allow it at some point in the send home lesson as well. Where do you typically add that in?
I will add it in... it's kind of dependent on the dog. If the dog's doing really good, I'll add it in with the downstays.
Okay. Like while they're in the down, you're talking?
Yeah, like if they're not messing up with me or them, like, all right, let's see what this does.
Sure.
And almost always, it's like clockwork, the dog will break whatever they're doing when the affection's applied. So it's a good teaching moment, like how to explain strategic affection, right? If we're kind of struggling through things, which I prefer those lessons, because obviously...
Same.
Yeah,
for sure.
Obviously, this is what you're going to get in the real world. So let's work through it now. Let's make sure you're good now.
Yeah.
But if those moments are happening and I don't want to distract the dog or the owner anymore, I'll wait till the very end, like after the collar explanation. The dog will be on a bed. It'll be tired. Yeah. I'll make sure it's on the bed. I'll ask them to give affection. We'll go over the affection thing then. Usually that'll also like bring the dog's energy back up too. Yep. So, and then we'll make sure the dog's stable and then start the walk.
I think adding it in the downstay is actually a really good idea. I typically do we'll do like a little 5-minute intermission kind of in the middle of the lesson, where it's like, hey, you know, let's give the dog a break for a minute, release them, let them hang out. And I'll let them kind of interact with the dog a little bit then and stuff. But I really like the idea of doing it with the downstay, because so often than not, I always tell people when they, you know, because I'll see in one-on-ones all the time, people ask me, why can't we, can we pet the dog? You know, can we, you know, give them praise or affection and stuff? And you got to be aware when you're training your dog that praise or food or any sort of like high value positive reinforcement in addition to it being a reinforcer, obviously, it's a distraction, right? Like your praise and your food and all that kind of stuff distracts the dog from the thing that you're doing. And it's important to work through, obviously, but if you add it in too early before the dog has a clear enough understanding of that stuff, if you're not doing like a positive treat-based training program, obviously, it's going to cause the dog to make a lot of mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, adding it in allows you to continue proofing and working through that additional distraction, where I'll explain to people when we add it in, like through positions and stuff, if I'm doing it in a one-on-one, like this is not to reinforce the dog right now. This is not to reward the dog. This is to test the dog's understanding of the position, frankly, right? Yeah. And for you may see it as like it's this positive experience and I'm telling the dog they're doing a good job and stuff, but to the dog, it's just a distraction.
Right. Especially with the relationship that they previously had, like 99% of the time, that's an affection-based relationship. So the dog's not going to see it as a reinforcer, just, a distraction. So.
Yeah. Cool. So initial part, dog is free, correcting the dog for jumping, kind of starting to shift that contrast a little bit. From there, we start jumping into the obedience-related stuff. And like the goal of that, obviously, just showing the owner how to give commands and enforce commands, right?
I think something huge to mention, though, after that first 20 minutes or like whatever that is, always grab the leash and take the dog to the bed instead of calling it to the bed.
It's a good call.
Yeah.
Yeah, setting him up for success for that first command. That first command right there is going to be challenging for the dog to decompress out of that state of mind and get into back their working state of mind. And you can kind of tell with the dog that you're working with, like when you're sitting there like, if I call you over here, are you going to do it or are you not going to do it? That leash can be very, very, very key for helping them work through that and having it be this like non-conflict driven like battle you fight like right at the very beginning, Yeah,
it's gonna make you look bad. It could shut the dog down.
Sure.
Because the dog wants to be with its owner more than me. Yeah. So I'm just gonna take that argument out of the equation, take the leash and take them over to the bed.
That is a great thing to do. I think an important thing is like all of those fights, right? Like whether it's recalling away from the owner or whether it's getting them to hold a downstay, like under the highest distraction. Cause I used to do like, I would bring the dog in and I would put them in a bed stay right away when I first started doing board and trains and like send home lessons. And for some of the dogs, it was fine. For other ones, it would just be a battle for like 20 minutes of getting the dog to like hold that bed stay, right? When I would bring them into the room. And, you start realizing what?
I just shook my head. It was clanking. Yeah.
You start realizing you could fight that fight eventually, right? Like you don't necessarily have, like you could be a little bit more strategic about where you fight that fight though, you know? And at the beginning of the send home, like as you're developing that relationship with the owner and as you're explaining the importance of working through a lot of these things, until you've had a chance to explain why we're going to have to fight that fight eventually. Yeah. For some owners like that can rub them the wrong way. That could be, it could look bad. It could shut the dog down before you're about to do a really long lesson with them. And then, then you got all these other fights you got to fight with them and stuff. So, you like I would say we'll get to it eventually, right? We'll address that eventually. It's not like we're going to ignore it and like allow the dog to just rehearse that behavior of just gluing up next to the owner and not working through it and stuff. But if you could help them as much as possible initially, it makes that fight so much easier than later on,
right?
And I think that's a really important thing to look at. Okay, cool. So working through obedience related stuff. From there, what do we do? Or what do you do? Because I don't know, because we have a lot of differences now already, which is good.
Yeah, I guess I've just created my own thing.
Which is great.
So then I've just personally been isolating. Like I will work the dog. I'll start with the bed command. Get the dog on the bed. Something good to note too is, and that you taught me, is that we always work them low. You stay really low on the levels. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to really go up in that send home. Because you just want to offer a lot of help. That's all stuff that can kind of be cleaned up. And you'll talk about levels, obviously, with the owner. But just for the sake of, really, you want the dog to mess up so you can show them how to fix those situations. Mm-hmm. So we'll do the bed, and then I will just give the owner, once the dog's doing it well with me, I would say usually three successful repetitions. I then allow the owner to start. So I'll give the owner the food. We use food as a reinforcer and just the leash. I will keep control of the remote. I will then explain exactly what to do, walk all the way up to the bed, tell the dog bed, make sure the dog gets on it successfully, and I'll just watch the owner do it. While they're trying to do it, something I've learned, I forget who's kind of told me this, but I don't interrupt them while they're working through it because they're going to be distracted. I kind of let them figure it out, and then I'll just point out little things that could make them more successful. Like, that looked good. I probably would have done this. Don't repeat your commands. Just trying to make sure that they understand it. And I think a lot of people come into this process thinking that it's going to be really easy. It looks easy, right? So when the dog starts testing them, I always make sure that they have a good understanding that with each person, the dog's going to test them differently, and then also that it's a patience thing, that the timing of this matters, like little details matter. I think that that's what helps me become successful. So I'll have each person work them with the bed command, and then we'll go through each of our obedience steps.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you ever feel like you're fighting people's egos sometimes through that?
Personally, no, because I don't. Yes, I see it that it's there,
yeah.
But I want people to feel comfortable with it. Like, it's not easy when you're like, this is your dog that you've lived with for how long, right? So
yeah.
I don't want to make you feel stupid.
Well, that's a really good point.
Definitely.
And I've had clients actually who've done stuff with other trainers say, like, that's something that's made them not successful in the past, that they like, that I just take my ego out of it. And the thing that I guess I do, since I kind of take a softer approach, though,
yeah,
I'll have people try to discredit me and just be like, okay, we're done here. And I'm like, no, we're not. Like, I have a soft, stern approach, I would say.
Yeah.
And do you think that, as you've done more send home lessons and you've been doing them for longer, or one-on-ones or whatever it may be, do you find that, like, just your confidence in working through those things has gone up?
Absolutely.
Because I feel like that's a lot of it, is people can tell when, like, just like dogs can feed off of energy, people, or certain types of people can feed off of energy and tell when you might not be the most confident in, like, what you're saying or what you're doing.
Yes.
And as you've, like, worked through this stuff more and more and more, I feel like your whole demeanor changes while you're doing it. You know, you're so much more relaxed and focused, and it's like, listen, if the dog makes mistakes, it's okay. I'm not going to stress about it. If you're making mistakes, that's okay. I'm going to coach you through it, you know? And then you kind of learn with each person, like, how firm or soft you need to be with them, but you're just, like, your whole attitude is different about it, you know?
Absolutely. I think something initially for me too, people are always, it's hard to get a read on people in those moments because there's so much information being thrown.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I used to leave them and just be like, they hated me.
Yeah. That's where I'm at.
I sucked. But knowing that, like, as long as they got, like, something out of it, I've learned it's okay if I didn't come off great, because we can clean all of that up too, and we have each other to kind of bounce that off of. So if I had those moments, I would always come to you guys and just be like, I don't think this went well, or, you know, and that's okay. And so you just prepare yourself for the next time, because the beauty of our program, right, is that we have so much follow-up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the long game of teaching people to coach their dog through situations better, especially when they have, like, years and years and years of ingrained habits, right? Yeah. You know, it was an interesting turn that I remember for me in one-on-one classes that I still talk about, where I started realizing, like, something's changing as far as my confidence level and working through situations or whatever. Was I used to have a lot of couples that would fight in my one-on-one classes. Like, they would just, like, they would get mad at each other and they'd start, like, yelling at each other. And I remember there were a couple times in particular where, like, heated arguments would break out.
Really?
Yeah.
I've not experienced that yet.
There was one in particular. I won't name names, but wonderful client. Both of them are fantastic, right? And they did really, really great in their lessons. But I remember one time, like, one of them was kind of calling the other one out on, like, not doing the homework at home and stuff. And the husband said, he's like, but I put the e-collars on the dogs the other day or something. And she just turns and looks at him. She's like, do you want a fucking cookie?
Oh my God.
and that obviously turned into a situation. I'm just sitting there with the dog, like, sit Yes.
Yeah, how do you navigate that?
Yes. At the time, I fucking did it.
Like, you gotta let that one play out.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what to do. But I can't remember the last time that's actually happened in a lesson at this point, because I feel like you get good at controlling the room, right? Like, you could sense when, like, you know, you could sense the starts of it, right? Just like you see with dogs, when, like, you know when a dog is going to start boiling up and, like, freaking out over something, you could tell with the owners where it starts off with typically one of them is micromanaging the other in the lesson.
Yeah, I see that.
Right? Like, the one starts, oh, you're doing it wrong. Oh, keep your arm loose. Do this, do that, right? And I'm like, listen, I got it. I appreciate the help, but, like, I will help her through it, or I will help him through it, or whatever it may be, you know? And I feel like a lot of times if you shut a lot of that stuff down right away, if you start noticing it, you know, and again, as politely as you can, it will never bottle over into anything bigger, you know?
Mm-hmm. What do you do? Something I've noticed is, like, it's usually the guy, but sometimes
You're totally correct.
They just do not want to do it, and they're not doing it well.
Yeah.
Personally, I will have them work through that one thing and then just explain, like, okay, if you're not, like I've said to people before, if you're not really planning on working with this, I would just stick to you doing the bed then. Yeah,
I think I think one of two things typically will happen, right? One is, I'm gonna make them do it one way or another, right? Like, again, like, not trying to be an asshole, but, like, if somebody is giving that much pushback, right? Like, we have to work them through it to some extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get them, like, let's just get a couple successful ones right now. I will try my hardest to explain the importance of it, because a lot of times I think if you're getting pushback, it's kind of a trust thing more than anything, right? Like, the person, for whatever reason, feels like they know more about the situation than you do, right? So a lot of times education, where it's like, you know, you could just explain the process and explain more of the nuanced details that don't really matter. But if you explain it in a way where it's like, hey, I actually do know a little bit more about this stuff than you do, they'll kind of soften up a little bit and go through the motions. And then you'll get some people where, and I see this in one-on-ones a lot, where, like, both parties will come to the first, like, 2 sessions, then one of them will just stop coming.
That makes sense.
Right. And there's nothing I could do about that, you know, and that happens semi-regularly, and it's whatever. That's fine. If you're going to be heading the show, you know, we'll work with you on it. And then if he or she or whoever wants to come in and learn more, then they're welcome to as well, you know?
Sure.
But not overthinking it. I mean, some people are just not interested in being that active a part in the training process, right? Some people are happy with how the dog is for them. And, you know, I say, like, as long as whoever is the active party is consistent with the rules and the structure and stuff like that, the dog should listen to them. And if the other person is happy with how the dog is listening to them, then that's fine, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty much.
A lot of those people I don't really take it personally, though, because I feel like they all wind up kind of turning around in the end, and, like, understanding if you're gentle with them but clear with them, and educating, you know, like, they'll take something out of it still, you know. It may not be everything we want them to, but they'll get something out of it.
Yeah, the walk's always like a game changer, I think.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that's the most representative, like, everyday life. Like, oh, I could take my dog on a walk. I think it has the most impact.
Yeah.
In people's minds, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And like we talked about with you know, the case of that trainer with the dog that had 4 sessions, right? Figure out, like, what does this person want out of the training process, right? If there's one, you know, you could ask questions like, what is the one thing that you just wish you could do with this dog, right? That you feel like you wasn't good enough, or you feel like you didn't have as good of a grasp on as possible, you know? Figure out what that one thing is and help them with that issue, right? Because I don't think anybody is so egotistical where they're like, everything was literally perfect. There was not a singular issue, you know? Yeah. So if you could figure that out, that can help quite a bit, you know?
Yeah, we talked about that on the way here.
And honestly, like, an approach I've kind of taken sometimes with it is, like, you know, reading people, like, you can kind of also, like, stroke that ego a little bit and, like, make them feel like you are smart, you know, all this stuff, you know?
Yeah, I do that a lot.
And, like, you could play the card of, like, buddy with them more than, like, instructor, and I feel like they're much more accepting of that information. Right?
That's a dude thing.
It totally is a dude thing, because I feel like I'm the same way, where, like, if I have like trainer colleagues and stuff like that, like, and I needed help with something, I would ask them for help from the standpoint of a friend, not as, like, a mentor. Like, that's just my personality, and it's not good, right? Like, I'm willing to accept that that's a flaw, but it is the reality of how, like, some people are. Right?
Yeah, I don't think that's wrong. I don't think it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's just a thing, you know? It's neither good nor bad, but I think that's a good way to approach it sometimes as well, you know? there's just some people that accept information in different ways.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
were you gonna say something, John?
I was just saying true.
Yeah. Whatever. Bridget, how have you liked doing send home lessons? You've been doing them a lot more frequently lately, and you've really stepped up with them, frankly. I mean, and gotten a really good, seems like a good relationship with a lot of your clients you've been doing them with.
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed learning, and it's definitely been a process learning how to talk to people and train people. Because like for 4 weeks I was a dog trainer, and then in 3 hours I'm a people trainer.
Sure.
So it's been navigating how to come across the people has been difficult and challenging. But I noticed, like with Murphy, Doodle Murphy, send home, like I put everything I had into that dog.
Yep.
And made sure he was absolutely perfect. And Murphy and I developed like the best relationship. When his owners came to pick him up, it took some time for him to get back into the groove with them. And I think that they appreciated that I had a relationship with him, and showing them that I knew their dog helped give them confidence in me. So I've just been learning new ways to talk to people and deal with different situations.
Sure. Do you do a lot of that kind of coaching with people, like when you do the rescue stuff and like you say send a dog home that you've been fostering for a while? Like, do you do like mock like send homes with them and stuff?
Yeah. So I'll go into their house with the dog, and we'll see how the dog vibes with them, and I'll just have the dog very structured on leash for the first couple seconds when we're coming in, so the dog's not like running after if they have cats or other dogs. We have a very structured way of meeting people. And then I'll drop the leash just like a send home and let the dog just sniff around for a little bit. And then I'll kind of explain the dog and learn the person and see if it's a good match. And
Very
most
cool.
of the time it is.
Do you have, bouncing or, well, let's finish off the send home one first here. Okay. So we finish all the obedience related training, right? We dive into walking related stuff, right? Is there anything else of key importance you feel like we'll do to kind of like set the dog up for success or work through any sort of nonsense throughout that send home?
Yes. Well, first, I think this kind of adds to what you said about Murphy. I think always knowing the situation, like what, and you said it too, like what are the biggest things that they need out of this? Once, and like before the walk, right? Making sure that you take the time to, like, they just made a big investment, right? So like taking time to like ask them about all the little details, and like usually I think that the times I've been most successful is I already know because I've researched it pretty like from their paperwork and stuff. But the behavioral issues are 99% of the time why they're here. So that's a huge thing that you want to address, because the obedience stuff is good, but how are we using it? Right.
Sure.
So that,
Yeah, like how do you implement it in your day to day?
And just really making sure that people understand that this is like a process. I tell people to have fun, make it like a teamwork thing between each other in the first week, that you're going to experience a lot of things. You have my email, but just take it slow. Like we're teaching a new language and in dealing with new things. So I think that's huge for the send homes.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say are like the most common things you see people come back on that like 1 week check-in and like say either went really good or they had issues with?
It's always the walk.
Yeah. It's the walk and the levels, I would say.
Yes.
Levels is a big one.
Not knowing, being comfortable enough with the levels.
Yeah.
I've been starting to tell people like I'll just set them up for this, that the one thing that would impress me most is if they can bring their dog in, have it wait at the door and put it down.
Yeah. That's what I tell people at the end. I'm like, so next time when you come for your follow-up, I want you to come in the door, and I want your dog to wait at the doors and come in and get in it down. And they're like, okay, we can do that.
Yeah, I'm always like, people always struggle with this.
Yeah,
so if you can do this,
exactly.
I'll
You
be
can
so
do it well.
I'll be so
Yeah.
impressed.
That's a really good one. I don't think people put enough emphasis on is like coaching them through exactly what walking back into the facility the next time is going to look like. Or if you're doing like an in-home follow-up, like what exactly do you need to do from that standpoint? You know, even stuff as simple as like knowing that people struggle with like levels and stuff. What like, you know, what level range should you be preset at for it? And what should you expect as far as the dog's behavior when they first come back in? Because I mean, listen, like I think the dogs.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you, appreciate it. The dogs get pretty jacked up coming back in. You know, like it's like this place that they just spent an entire month at and had all these fun experiences at and stuff, and they get really, really excited. And some of them, like I mean, get super, super pumped up to see like the trainer, just like they would like an owner. So it's also our job to like play that same role that we have the owners play when we first bring the dog back into the room. Of I know your dog's going to be excited to see me, but I'm not going to be giving them attention or reinforcing that or anything like that. I think that's those are all big things is coaching that expectation initially, because these owners don't know, right? They've never experienced that before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's cool. I think the send homes are really cool because you could overthink them sometimes and think like this is like the most important thing in the world right now, right? This send home lesson has to go perfect. I have to make sure the owner understands literally every piece of information that I'm throwing at them. I need to make sure the dog isn't making too many mistakes, but they're still making enough mistakes where the owner is still learning things. And like, it gets real easy to get like super in over your head with it, where I think that, you know, that's the reason why we provide all of the follow-up support like you were discussing, right? There's so many trainers out there that provide like 2 lessons post board and train, which is just ridiculous. Like I think we're very, very competent trainers, and there are a lot of clients that after 2 sessions post board and train do not have a grasp on things, right? They still need significantly more. And I think trapping people into that box puts so much expectation on them as well as on the training that you did with the dog.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I think I've learned too, like if I put less pressure on myself of like making it the end of the world thing, it makes it go so much better. And preparing myself, those 2 things are, I think, the biggest things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I think all of those things, the follow-up support is the biggest thing that we do to help mitigate issues, not sweating the little things in it, you know, making sure that the owner's making mistakes, making sure the dog's making mistakes, and showing them how to work through those things. Pushback with owners. I mean, honestly, like you're going to see the pushback, like we said, and you just got to be prepared to work through it just like you would. Pushback is nothing but, you know, the dog succumbing to some sort of distraction, right? The distraction of not wanting to do something, the distraction of wanting something else more, et cetera, et cetera. So coach them through it. Don't overthink it. Provide lots of follow-up support.
The only thing, like the last thing I think would be really important for like another trainer to think of is not to get too obsessed with the levels. Giving the owner a range, behavioral levels, like outside walk levels, and then just obedience levels. Especially for that first week, you can get down. It's always going to be way higher at like a week after.
Yep. Big time. Yeah, because you're holding them to a higher standard. You know, we keep it lower in the send home because we expect a lot of mistakes because it's new for the dog. After that, you know, it's kind of expected that they kind of mind their P's and Q's. So good stuff. So that's how we work through send home lessons. Bridget, one thing I was going to ask you. So do you have like a program that you like put your fosters through when they come into the house? I feel like a lot of people will ask, like, when you get a new dog, what are the first things you should do when you bring them into the home?
They say, well, for mine, if I bring a new dog in, I put them in my basement in a crate for like 3 days, and obviously potty breaks, but they're not around my other dogs yet.
Never let them out.
Yeah, for 3. I just ignore them for 3 days.
Stick them in the basement.
All that barking.
Wow.
Yep, just ignore them.
Is it essential the crate is in the basement?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's away from my other dogs, and it's a nice basement. It's not
It's
like
a nice
a serial killer basement. I have a camera down there. I can watch the dog. It's just like a lot of structure, like mimicking our board and train where the dogs are in their crate, but they get lots of out time and potty breaks. I walk my fosters every day, and then I'll incorporate them with my own group. And I just absolutely will not allow any fighting or snapping, and I shut that down immediately. I'm very structured with who's out when. Like Toonie, my dog, has actually been really bad lately with like snapping. So she's not out when my fosters are out until I can get more of a handle on her. So just, it's like I run a mini social in my house like every day, every single day. So it's just navigating how the foster is going to fit into that. And I've been very lucky where it's been seamless for the last 3 or 4 fosters, where I can incorporate them into my pack. But I did have that one dog, Lindy, who I would never have trusted him around my dogs.
Yeah, and that dog had a lot of issues past just like that was coming out of a shelter and stuff. So you do the 3 days, and is that kind of like your decompression period?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I feel like, kind of overthink the decompression a little bit from the standpoint of like, take 2 weeks, let the dog cool down, don't do anything with the dog, this and that. So it sounds like for you, the decompression is more of a let's let them little by little earn their freedoms in the house. It doesn't necessarily sound like it's a let them get away with a bunch of things for like a short period of time because they need to like get comfortable first. Is that kind of how you look at that?
I want them to be comfortable and trust me, and everything is structured those first 3 days, like potty breaks, meal times, walks are all planned out and structured. So it's a routine, and then when they're incorporated with my own dogs, I see like a huge turnaround because they're like, hey, this dog is not freaking out. This dog likes it here. I can calm down. Like, I don't have to be so on edge because all these other dogs aren't worried. And then everybody's eventually like sleeping together and snuggling and
doing all the fun dog things.
Yeah, being dogs. And as far as training wise, sometimes I will work on them if they have very specific things, but I don't know the home they're going into, like what they're going to be training. Like my foster Odie went to a home and they're strictly positive only. So I did what I could with him, just with leash and like just using a slip lead and treats, and he ended really well. So I have to adapt.
Yeah, and I think even with that stuff, like there's a lot you can accomplish, like without utilize. Like a lot of shelters and stuff are really concerned about not being able to utilize prongs or e-collars and stuff like that. And there is so many things you could do with just like a leash and food.
Exactly.
Tons of it, because we know this 90% of the issues are the structure that we're setting and the routines we're creating and stuff like that, and then motivating a dog to do things, right?
Yeah.
And, even when you start getting into, it gets easy to, get it in your head, like, I'm never going to be able to teach like reliable downstays or recalls or this or that without ever giving a correction, which you may not proof it to the best or to the standard that we would hold a lot of dogs to that capacity. But I mean, if you have a dog that's motivated, you could teach them to do a lot of things, if you take your time with it and have some patience and stuff. Yeah.
And I have a puppy mill dog right now. I don't know her exact background, but she's so skittish and scared that it was just like the first month I had her, I never saw her. She was just in the crate and very scared of everything. And her confidence has really increased. She is available for adoption, Rita. Her name is Rita May. So if anyone's looking for a little poodle, she has come very far away, and she's just really cute. And I've gotten her confidence up a lot with food because she's so food motivated. Sure. She'd like dance over to me and like she would want the treat in my hand, but she's like, I don't want to go up to you. And the only way that she would get the food is eating it out of my hand. Yep. So that built our relationship a lot.
Yeah, hand feeding is super essential with a lot of dogs. Like, people don't realize the power of it. And that's why I get so frustrated sometimes when I see dogs come in and, they're free fed or they're, overweight or this or that. 'Cause it's like, man, if people would just realize that like having their dog on a very concrete, strict feeding schedule just makes the training process so much better. God.
Your relationship with your dog is so much stronger.
So much better. So much stronger. And then some people get so concerned that it's like, I'll have some clients that's like, okay, cool, adjust your feeding schedule to this, and they'll do it the first week, and they'll be like, he just acted so hungry all the time. I was like, that's the point.
Yeah,
we're not starving them, but like, I'm always hungry, right? Like, of course, a dog is going to be there, an animal, right?
Right.
So that is always really frustrating to me when I see stuff like that.
This is all super cool because I feel like you literally set these dogs up so well for success. You literally all the way down to the finest detail of they only want positive only kind of training. So you even went that far to work with that. And I think that's amazing. I think a lot of people would see more success with their foster rehomes if they could take all that time that you do to dedicate for that specific dog, you know?
Yeah. That's why I love the rescue I'm working with, because I don't have not always a time limit. Like the APL wanted to get the dogs in and out of the shelter as fast as possible, which is totally understandable. You need to make room for more dogs. Yeah. So the smaller organization, I've had Rita for about 4 or 5 months now.
Yeah.
And I've had that time to take with her and make her better so she can be adopted out and placed in a really good home and be the best version of herself that she can.
That's really cool. Man, I would be lying if I said, so we're looking to get a puppy and stuff. I have considered the idea of getting a foster or something temporarily, just because I feel like, you know, from an egotistical standpoint, I have a lot I could offer to a foster to not have it just be we're donating a board and train to, you know, come to our facility and stuff like that, but really do the house thing and teach the dog appropriate house manners and stuff. I've definitely kind of considered that a little bit in the last couple of weeks. So I think it would be, it's interesting. I've never done anything like that before, right? Like I said, we've done it at facilities and stuff, but it's definitely something I've considered doing. And especially honestly, seeing you do it all the time and how rewarding it is for you. It seems like it would be a cool process. You know?
It is. Yeah. I love it. And poor Justin never knew. It was that meme. It's when you're nice to the weird girl and then you end up with 7 dogs. And that's just our life now. And he's just been such a great partner in allowing me to have all these dogs. And he's not always happy about it. But I'm just I'm bringing home another dog. And he's oh, okay.
It's the other meme where it's I wanted a dog. My husband didn't. So we compromised and got another dog.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's this big police officer guy, and he goes in, he's yeah, my chihuahua. And he gets roasted at work for having little dogs, but he loves them so much. So.
Yeah, it is cool to see when you post all your stories with him and them and stuff, you could tell how much joy he gets out of all that.
Yeah, and he loves Nelson. Nelson and him have the greatest relationship. It kind of makes me mad because Nelson used to be mine. Now he's definitely Justin's.
That's how Vinny is with Kate. Vinny literally doesn't give a fuck about me anymore.
Yeah.
When she's home, he's always with her. What about cats? Are you into cats?
No.
Okay.
Not a cat person.
Yeah.
No offense to those that are, you know.
Yeah, I'm not really a cat person either, so that's fine. Cool. All right, so segueing here. So this is the real juice of the podcast. So just yesterday, Cali Canine out in California released his first Netflix special, Canine Intervention. So I started watching it last night. I got 2.5 episodes in. Did you guys watch all of it yet?
No, I just watched the first episode.
Just the first episode. Okay, so I want to discuss this a little bit because I was really, really excited when this was first announced because, you know, he is a balance trainer, obviously. He believes in prong collars. He believes in e-collars, giving corrections, stuff like that. And frankly, a lot of the shows out there right now, you know, since basically Caesar's show, have all been very positive reinforcement based, right? You have Victoria Stillwell and you got, you know, all of these YouTube sensation dog trainers that are all just you know, preaching the word of only using treats and stuff like that. So I thought this could be kind of a really good balance of showing people that, you know, corrections are okay. These training tools are okay, you know, how to work through more serious behavioral issues, things like that. I will say I was a little disappointed when I watched it. Not necessarily anything against him because he is a very good trainer, but you could tell how directed the show was, as far as what they wanted to show and the information they were giving and how little emphasis was put on the really important details, especially that first episode, because I feel like they put that one first because it's probably the most serious behavioral issue dog that they got in for the entire show, but it gave zero information as far as how to actually work through the problem, and if anything, it showed all of the things you should not be doing, I think.
Yeah, it's not a show designed for dog trainers. It was for the common people that are oh my god.
It's for entertainment, which is what pisses me off even more, because I was all for like this is a show for the general public because if it gives you some better information as far as what to do and not to do, like I think that helps, right? And I think another side of the equation, which I never really realized because he doesn't post a lot about like his actual training on his pages and stuff, you could tell how much, you know, in his fairness, he understands his clientele and understands how he needs to communicate with them in order for them to like him, you know, because he works with a lot of celebrities and things like that. But it just, oh man, that dog. So that dog in particular that they showcased on the first episode of it, they had a 3-legged pit bull. The dog was having some like pretty serious fear aggression issues. It was owned by some entrepreneur guy out in Los Angeles, you know, obviously a very successful individual. And he got this dog. Man, I'm a mess today. So he got this dog. The dog had, you know, a rough history. The dog was owned by a homeless guy that got shot, and the dog got shot too. Like, that's pretty dramatic, obviously, right? So naturally, they played a lot into that with it.
Of course.
You know, which, listen, I mean, that's definitely a traumatic history that you have to be aware of with a dog like that, right? I'm all for that. But the problem is if you dwell on that, that's not going to help anything. Then 2, they went to go see the dog. They showed that the dog actually is serious. He's bitten like 3 people before in the house. He looked like he did some damage in some of the photos and stuff, or she did. And all it was the entire episode was this owner just absolutely smothering this dog with affection, smooching and holding and hugging and picking up and creating arousal and telling her it's okay and this and that. And even at one point, like, you know, Joss was like walking through the house and she was reacting at him, and the guy was like hugging her and telling her it's okay, and then she bites him on the fucking nose, right? Like, and he's just like, I can't believe she did that. This is making me realize how much more serious the situation is. And that would have been a prime opportunity to explain redirected aggression, right? Why did the dog bite him in that situation, and why is that actually his fault and not the dog's fault when you shouldn't be sticking your face 3 inches away from a dog's face that's reacting, right? And then, you know, past that, he took the dog into his training facility and you know, obviously did good training, right? It's very positively based. There was no corrections involved or anything really, aside from, I think they said, a correction is when you say no and pull up on the leash under the subtitles. And basically it was all just like slip lead related stuff. And took the dog back and basically just told the guy, you need to comfort her and tell her it's okay, right? Which is not how you work through those issues. So, I don't know. I feel like I had all sorts of emotions watching it last night. What did you guys think?
It was interesting. Like, for Lady Macbeth, like, the episode was like, she came to the facility, went up a ramp, down a ramp, stayed in a down while he rode a bike, and she was cured. There was no explanation to what he did or his methods. Like, he's like, it wasn't like hiding his
dopamine.
methods.
How many times did he say dopamine in that episode?
And like, just the way he did things, I was like, oh, I'm unsure. And he's just a very alpha male trainer. Like,
Yeah, I mean, as far as that's concerned, I mean, I think like that's why he works with those. I mean, the second episode, you'll see he's working with some boxer, like a big name boxer, who he bred a Dutch Shepherd for him, and the dog is his like personal protection dog, which that one I have all sorts of feelings about. But since you guys didn't watch that episode, we won't get super in depth into it. But he reads the room and he knows how to communicate with the type of people he's working with where they like him, but doesn't actually give them the information of how do you work through this problem. There was even a point in that first episode where the dog's in the crate and reacting, and the owner is sitting there explaining to him, this is why this dog is doing this. You see, she feels like this, this, and this. And I was like, oh, yeah, explain to the dog trainer why the dog is doing the behavioral issues that you're seeing. It was just, I don't know. Emily, go ahead. You look like you have something to say.
I have a lot to say. I just felt like, so the dopamine thing, that's not really something that I essentially isn't using. So dopamine, right? He's saying like to distract Lady Macbeth with toys and essentially
counter conditioning, right? Is what he was explaining, you know.
I just don't know that that's necessarily like a sustainable way to modify behavior. And I think that there was a lot of emphasis put on that. I also felt like maybe this was probably just for the show, right? But I felt that he put that guy in kind of dangerous positions.
I would agree.
And
himself and the guests that he had come over at the very end of that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the trainers that came up to the dog in the facility and were like, baby, hi.
Well, that situation kind of pissed me off a little bit because here's the thing. We know this. If we get a dog in...
Can you give me that battery behind you?
Oh, it's like plugged in down there. We know this. Like, if we get a dog in that has aggression issues, right? By the end of the training program, the dog is going to be fine with everybody in the facility.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've all handled the dog so many times. So we could all go up and hang out and interact with the dog because we're kind of a part of that dog's pack at that point, right? So showing it with the other trainers in his facility there at the end, it's like, that's not, it looks like to everybody else, like, look how good the dog is, right? But, like, that's not showcasing the dog's actual issues is when the dog is, and this is where you get into the actual specifics of the problem, right? Fear aggression related issues is not necessarily a aggression response towards people in general, right? A fear aggression response is that when the dog is in a fearful state of mind, they resort to aggression, right? Mm-hmm. So of course, if the dog is comfortable, they're not going to do those things. And we could talk about that and say that that's the solution is you make the dog more comfortable. You wait until the dog is more comfortable before you do these interactions and stuff, right? But the problem is not the people. The problem is when the dog is in that fearful state of mind, you know? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That definitely irritated me is when they showed that is like, that's not showcasing the problem. And then when he goes to introduce the dog to the other people in the house, like you could tell the entire time he's holding the leash with like an inch on the other end of it because he knew that dog was going to turn around and try to nail them like at any point. Right. Then he was having that guest like have him like jump up on him and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, just tell him to come up. Look, she's trying to give you kisses.
Yeah.
Like,
that's just not setting anyone up for success. It's but like, okay, maybe you could handle the dog, right? But in that moment, but is clearly that guy needed a dynamic change with that dog. Yeah. So
he needed to learn how to be a more effective leader for the dog.
Can we talk about the dopamine thing though? Like I've just never heard that. Is that kind of more?
So it's counter. So, and this is where like, so Kate and I were watching it and she was like, very interested in it. She was asking me a lot of questions as far as like, what is that? What's he doing? This, that. The dopamine thing he was explaining is just counter conditioning, right? So counter conditioning is when you're creating a more positive association with something the dog has a negative association with, right? So yeah, food, praise, toys, all those things put the dog in like a happy dopamine state of mind, right? So if you do that, the idea is if you do that around like a trigger that the dog is perceiving as negative enough times, the dog will develop a positive association with being around that thing. Right? So if Vinny is scared of garbage trucks or whatever, right? And I go play ball with him next to the garbage truck going down the street like a bunch of times, right? Eventually he's going to tune out that thing and pay attention to me more, right? Mm-hmm. So it will help to gain a better association with those things, right? The problem is missing out on the control aspect of it, right? Especially when dogs are scared, if you don't have control around that thing, what if the dog isn't motivated enough by the thing that you have, right? You have no means of controlling the dog and things can go sideways very quickly, right?
Right.
So I think that's the dopamine state of mind is just, again, you're creating a more positive association with certain triggers.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Do you think that there was more emphasis on that aspect due to because I haven't watched that far in, but he does work with e-collars, and I saw like on his Instagram he has prong collars. Mm-hmm. Do you think they're almost avoiding?
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah,
now I'm only 2 episodes in, obviously, so I'm curious if he gets more into that kind of stuff and eases you into it throughout the show, right?
Sure.
I was gonna say, do you feel like this is actually like how he is as a trainer, or is it a lot of fluff bullshit for Netflix?
Yeah.
I think it's probably a combination of the two, right? I think that, there are some, and listen, I understand this, obviously. I think there are some trainers that put a lot of emphasis on, making sure that we're creating happy, confident dogs, which is very important, but they could lose sight of some of the important details, right, through doing that. And I think that the types of clientele he deals with, right, are the type of people that aren't going to put up with that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
If I were to go into Kevin Hart's house, because he trains Kevin Hart's Dobermans, right? If I were to go into Kevin Hart's house and just slap an e-collar on his Doberman and just start nailing him for jumping and stuff like that, he would be like, you go fuck yourself. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of build that rapport with people, I think, right?
True.
And, especially, getting back to the alpha male kind of thing, right? I think that there are some people out there that, like when they have that personality, if you want that to be your client, you have to cater to that to some extent. And, I don't necessarily think that's great. I don't think that's the best thing ever. But you have to break through and build that trust with them, just like we were talking about with the clients that come in, that sometimes you kind of got to stroke their ego a little bit to get them to trust you and like you so that they'll take your direction, right? You're playing the game. I think, though, at some point he has to transition to, actually training the dog the way the dog needs to be trained,
Yeah, for sure.
So
what I found interesting, too, is clearly there's a stigma with the e-collars, the prong collars, right? So maybe that's what they're trying to avoid. But in that training session when he was training Lady Macbeth, I felt like he was screaming at her. Yeah. And I was I was alarmed by it a little bit. Like I've never seen, personally, I've just never seen anyone train that way. So
that's a competition-based thing, is that type of like communicating. Like you've probably seen this in like field trial and stuff. Like when you're communicating with dogs in drive, and again, I think this is unnecessary too, but it's very sit, down, no, right? Like it's a lot of like projection behind the commands that you're giving.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And stepping into her, like he's like, I'm just gonna step into her, and it's just like, that's dangerous.
Yeah, it depends on the dog, right? Like I mean, like spatial pressure, right, is a very real training tactic, right? And especially if you're working downs from a distance, right? Like my spatial pressure in moving towards you is going to stop you from continuing to go forward, right? Or some of the stuff he was doing initially with Lady Macbeth with the fake hand, right? Where he was explaining the concept of like, her running him off essentially, right? And like he like showed like how he would like agitate her and then she would start barking and he would like kind of run away, right? Or she would start barking and then he would move into her space and she would kind of stop. Again, dangerous, like you were saying, but real concepts. That's the reason why dogs do a lot of these things. They rehearse these reactive behaviors because they learn it makes people go away. So not all, like, it's not like everything was incorrect. It's just there wasn't enough explanation behind a lot of the things he was doing, and I think it was done in too like sketchy of a way where it was like unnecessary. So did you finish the whole first episode? Did you see that second dog also that he worked with?
No, I definitely finished the episode, but what was the second dog?
The German Shepherd.
No,
there was a second dog in the episode.
Unless it just rolled through into the second episode for me. I think it just must
have rolled because...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the next one, there's like then I must have watched 3 episodes. The next one, there's like a German Shepherd Husky mix that's in the house that, is just completely bonkers out of control. And same deal. Like all the training tactics were exactly the same of like walk down the street holding food in your hand to teach the dog to like stay in the heel position and stuff. And it was all shaping related stuff, right? Now, a couple of cool things I think here that, well, let me ask you guys, what did you like about the episode? Anything in particular? Any takeaways from it?
I have a few takeaways. I thought that, honestly, any sort of exposure into the balanced training world, especially on like a platform like Netflix, I think is huge for all of us. So I'm really happy that even if it's not a direct representation, obviously you have to have that kind of fluff. But I think it's a really good, like, I'm just happy that it's out there. I do like that he was utilizing like other like methods that I've not seen. Obviously, like this is a good learning opportunity for me.
Like what?
Just like with the hand and stuff. I've never done anything like that. Like and just the sport dog stuff too. I never knew that as well. I don't think I've gotten far enough in to really like form a total opinion of the show yet. But I'm glad it's out there.
Bridget, anything?
I definitely agree with you. Like, I like the kind of training aspect of it, and his methods like were interesting, and I definitely like to explore that more in my own training moving forward, like what works and what doesn't. But it was just really confusing. I found it like...
It was a little confusing. As a dog trainer looking at it too, where like you understand some of the things he's doing, but then the explanations behind it were a little contradicting at sometimes.
Yeah, it's like there was never any explanation how he got from point A to point B. It was just like...
Yeah.
Lady Macbeth went up a ramp, came down, and she is fixed. And I thought that was...
That's all it took,
Yeah.
Well, and I guess one other thing I did like too, and I think you could probably attest to this, like seeing dogs from shelter situations being rehabilitated is huge.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, is people realizing that, aggression related stuff can be helped, right? Yeah, for sure. I think that's really cool. One other thing that I did that I do appreciate a lot about his training program that helps me to it helps me to continue putting emphasis on is, like we were talking about with the positive only stuff, how much can be accomplished with just food. So, pushing aside her behavioral issues, right? His training program with her, from the looks of it, assuming they didn't like use a prong collar or an e-collar and then just take it off for the video footage, which I don't necessarily think is the case. I think it really showcased that, like, he did do relatively good training with the dog. The dog was motivated. The dog was engaged. He was showing how you could work through distractions and stuff like that using very minimal corrections, like with the bicycle, for example. He showed her making some mistakes, getting her back into the down, and then being able to do it successfully with using nothing but just helping with the leash. And I think, what was interesting is we were watching that last night. And this morning, I'm just scrolling through Instagram, and I came across some of our videos and stuff we were posting from the other day of like updates. I think it was Grayson or something. And, a lot of those tactics we can implement into our program in those early stages of the training. So, for example, right, we teach all of this stuff with pretty much just food and like very, very, very minimal e-collar, if any, right? Throughout that process, we could start layering in a lot of that distraction-based stuff and help the dog through those things, which will then help us more when we go to add the corrections in, right? There's no reason why we can't teach a dog to hold a down stay while we walk out of the room and come back in using no correction other than just leash pressure, right? There's no reason why we can't do that. Or continuing to work in higher distracting areas, like teaching a dog that's nice and food motivated to get on the bed in the lobby while somebody's picking up a dog or something, right? All of those are realistic things that we can do and shape early on in that teaching process that will make the proofing process 9,000 times easier because they've already had some taste of what distraction training is, So I think that was really cool to see as a trainer of like, I may be pushing this to a higher standard later on, but like this is all still, you could still make a lot of success with that kind of stuff, Yeah.
Yeah, like Willow's dad, for example, like he's very invested in her training. And during his symptom, when you stepped out for a second, he's like, my biggest goal is to take her to a bar patio and have her in a down.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can never imagine myself doing that. And I was like, well, we can work towards that. So, like, how would you work towards that? Like, getting Willow to be going to a bar and staying at a down when she's such a reactive dog.
You would start with, can you do it at a park bench out at a park, I mean, you figure like a lot of these picnic tables and like pavilions and stuff at like Rocky River Reservation or whatever it may be, that's no different than an outdoor patio. It's less populated, obviously, right? But you still have the distraction of people walking down and past the path, right? Then moving to somewhere like a hardware store or something, You have a lot of different ways you can ease into that where you simulate it all the same, right? In your fucking house, right? Say this for the dining room table. Can your dog hold it down, stay next to you while you're eating dinner for 45 minutes? If you can't do it there and have it be perfect, then you have no business trying to do it elsewhere. So there's a lot of shaping and stuff that I think can be done utilizing stuff like that and just showing the same picture in different environments, Emily, anything?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that like us, I guess going back to the proofing stuff too, like us making sure that we're successful with that in every situation. So we have the confidence of getting him to that point and her, and also just kind of having a game plan in your head and then being able to kind of break it down for him as well. Like, oh, if you get this, if we're successful here and here, like how do we continue to build there? So yeah, totally agree.
I saw him at Edgewater the other day walking faithfully with Willow by his side.
Oh yeah?
It was just really cute.
He's a dedicated dog dad.
He's at DDD.
Triple D. I think another thing that we have started doing a lot more of is our break room is very similar to that. Sitting at the break room on leash, simulating like you're at a table at a restaurant. There's enough people in and out of that break room all the time where that's going to simulate something that's very, very similar. Granted, it's people that the dog knows, right? But it's the same exact situation, just with people that the dog is more comfortable with, So shaping it like that as well. I think there's a lot of situations you could shape, and plan for those bigger pictures if those are goals that people have. In making sure that they could be successful with it from some capacity. Because I think a lot of people struggle with, if they're sitting at a bench or something, like having their dog comfortably sit in a downstay next to them, you know? And that picture of us being in like a seated position while the dog is performing commands and stuff is a different picture dogs aren't typically used to.
Yeah. And people passing, maybe coming up to your dog and asking to pet it and walking around.
Yeah. At downstay drills we were working the other day where we had multiple dogs in downstays while others were passing by.
That was a cool exercise.
You know, lots of things like that. You just pulling that mic closer?
I was.
Cool.
I was thinking, do you think once the whole Netflix series out all at once, like they usually do it?
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
I wonder if he'll ever come out and say how he felt about the portrayal of his training and stuff. Do you think so far that they're doing an accurate job of presenting how he works?
It's hard to tell. Like I don't know him well enough as a trainer. I know he's very successful, you know, like he has a very successful business out in California. He gets a very high caliber of clientele that comes in, right?
Yeah.
And he does, one of his big things he does is his group classes, which you see at the beginning of the episode he showcases. Like he does a lot of like 10, 15 dog group classes where they'll like go take the streets of Los Angeles and do like downstays and sit stays and stuff with their dog. And if you look at that, like all those dogs have prong collars and e-collars on, or the majority of them do, I should say, right? So from what I've seen so far, I would say no, they're showing just the beginning stages of, I know he's a very positive reinforcement-based trainer, right? Like he really tries to have the dogs motivated and looking good and sharp with their commands and stuff, which I think is awesome. But I do know that he transitions at some point to holding those dogs to a high standard. Like you can just tell in the way that he communicates with his dogs, right? That is not all positive-based training, right? The reliability that he has with those dogs.
Yeah.
So
I wish they would have like, I mean, I guess because it's such a huge Netflix special that they had to do like the special cases kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I wish it was almost even more I don't know, I guess A&E like TV show where it's like they actually go to his shop and just kind of like the day-to-day type of thing. I just feel like
make it like American Chopper where
yeah,
they're yelling
there
and
you
throwing
go.
chairs.
Like I think it'd be cool to have an episode where they do the packs or whatever and you see like actual people getting real world like knowledge from him. You know, other than this, you know, three-legged dog that got shot and you know, we're all worried about that now.
Yeah, you know what another cool takeaway I think was from it was I'm sure you noticed him say it a bunch of times, the break and play. You remember that?
Yeah.
So I think that that's really cool from the standpoint of, and this is something I had Krista do with Hamilton a little bit more because he's deaf, so you can't use a lot of the encouragement you would, but be engaging in between repetitions, right? So the break and play he used as like when they ended the command, break, and then just kind of interact with the dog and hang out with them for a minute or so before putting them back into command. And I think what it does is it creates a lot more drive and engagement on that release of like, wow, like we're creating like a reward event kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I really liked that actually, as opposed to like some of the mundane, like when we're doing the monotonous repetitions of getting the dog in bed over and over again.
It's also going to create, it's clarity.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think they're confused sometimes with the like, especially if we're like, okay.
Yeah, I think it can make a contrast between we're in command and we're not in command, right?
Yeah.
We're okay. There's no expectation with it, right? But like you can make it like this fun, like wow, you did it, right? We're done for a minute, right? Hang out, loosen up, right? So I think stuff like that, those are all really good things to kind of keep in mind as you're working with a dog, you know, and seeing somebody implement stuff like that. Like I would say I try to engage with dogs in between repetitions, or when I finish sessions, I try to be looser with them once they're kind of past their training and stuff.
Yeah.
But when you see somebody implement something like that into their training program, where that's a thing it looks like he does very commonly and very frequently with the dog, I thought that was cool to see as well. That was something else that I think I got from it.
Yeah.
So. It just goes to show, even if you don't agree with everything that a trainer is doing, like there are always little details you can see that it's like, that's kind of cool, or I like the way that you're doing that, you know?
Definitely.
So, you know, aside from, you know, like I said, my general thoughts of just being a little disappointed with how they portrayed the actual training, like, you know, there definitely were some relatively neat takeaways from it. So, cool. Anybody got any last points?
I think going back to Bridget, I think it's pretty cool that where you are in your position in life, like would you think you would be doing what you're doing right now if I asked you when you first moved to Cleveland?
I was trying to feed squirrels.
I mean, you upgraded just a little bit from squirrels to tiny
Yeah.
dogs, but I mean, I think it's pretty cool. Like, even with me, you know, like I had a different change in life to become a photographer. I think it's kind of cool the same way that, you know, life dealt you no jobs in what you were trying to get, and you made the best out of it, and now you're doing something really great with your life, you know? So I think it's really cool.
Thank you.
All the stuff that you've accomplished, you know, just going for it.
Yeah, I just emailed Miracle on a whim one day, and I was like, y'all hiring?
Y'all
And
We were
hiring.
like,
Kayla was like,
yeah,
come in for an interview tomorrow. And I was like, okay.
perfect. And then a question for you.
For me.
Yeah, is
Ready.
because I remember when we started Miracle. I mean, this goes back to our send home question, but you were basically doing all the send homes. I mean, you had to kind of quality check everyone, and now you're at this point.
Krista and Taylor were doing
Well,
a
yeah,
decent amount. Of
yeah, a
that
decent amount. But now it's to the point where I mean, you don't even worry about it. I mean, you got such a great team. So,
Yep.
How does that feel for you as a leader and a boss to have, you know, these new trainers just come in and now they're taking the lead on their own dogs and doing them start to finish, and you don't even have to worry about it? How does that make you feel?
Well, I always tell everybody that, like, as somebody who had no fucking interest, knowledge, or anything of, like, owning a business or, like, leading a group of people or anything, and still, frankly, don't, right? Still, I'm kind of figuring it out on a day-to-day basis, to be able to see something that, like to see a group of people be able to, like, work together so successfully and care so deeply about the work that we're trying to do is one of the coolest feelings in the world, from the standpoint of just, like, we're figuring it out, right? We're getting there, and to see that growth is very awesome, right? From the standpoint of just, like, it freeing up so much time in my day to day to do other things, like, it's one of the greatest things in the world to be able to, like, fully trust the people that are doing those things and not feel like I need to, like, micromanage it, right? And I've had, you know, we've talked about this very regularly, where I've always had issues with, like, trust of, like feeling like everything is getting done to the capacity that it needs to get done, not because I don't trust the people, but because I care so deeply about the work that I do, that it's really hard to, like, you know, it's really hard to, like, relinquish all of that control, right?
Yeah.
To, like, a certain aspect, which is something that's as important as the board and trains are, because that's, you know, those people are typically the people that are coming in with the most serious issues, right? And to see, like, time after time, like, the reviews that we get in, whether it's for Emily or Bridget or Krista or whoever, to be able to, like, have, like, when I was doing a lesson with, like, Heather the other day, and she was just like, I just want to let you know, like, how absolutely amazing it's been working with Emily. And, like, they, like, to have these clients that I don't even frankly know at this point come up to me and tell me, like, how wonderful it is working with, like, all of you guys individually is, like, the coolest feeling in the world, right? And I don't, like, and that's because, like, you guys care about this, right? That's not because of anything I'm doing, right? So, yeah, it's great.
Boom. Last thoughts, ladies?
I think that
Now that they're like,
wraps it up.
Foster a dog.
Foster a dog.
there it is.
Go do it. Get out there. Help your local rescue. Yeah, that's it.
Where are they going to find you, Bridget?
Where are they going to find me?
Yeah, on your socials and stuff?
I don't know my tag.
Yes, you do.
Oh. Is
Don't
it?
you have a tiny dog training?
Yeah.
page?
Yeah, training tiny dogs
Okay.
is my Instagram, I think.
Training tiny
Yeah.
dogs. Was Spork's account has been
Spork's account was taken from him. He was just not using it responsibly for good.
Spork was looking up all the wrong things.
Yeah.
yeah. Dang it, Spork.
Sweet. Yeah, we're gonna wrap that up on that. We're happy you came, Bridget. Thanks for coming again, Emily.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
thank
having
you.
us.
Another random episode.
It was a good one though.
Talk about all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So if you want to find us, hit us up at miraclecaninetraining.com, Instagram at miraclecaninetraining, at David the Dog Trainer, Emily
At Emily.Lynn.Nickel.
Bridget's training tiny dogs.
Training tiny dogs.
Josh Dobey.
Josh Dobey Productions.
All right.
Thanks,
Go
guys.
team.
See ya.
And we're back. Okay, so so we turn off the podcast, and then Bridget pulls out of her pocket 3 pages of notes that she has on the Canine Intervention show. So we have to talk about these. So
Okay.
what do you got? What do you got for us?
So some of my points were, why did he make so many kissing sounds? Did you notice, like...
Yes.
Like, what is that?
So
Why?
So Bridget's been holding out on us. Okay, so the kissing, I mean, it's just engagement, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's making different noises to try to gather the dog's attention, right? It's like, hey, come here. Hey, come on, come on, come on, come on,
I
right?
did it so much, though.
Some people, it's almost like a bad habit that they have, right? Is they over fluff things. It's no different than and I don't know if this is in your notes also, the good down, good sit, good sit. A lot of trainers overdo that kind of stuff because, and frankly, I think this is it. And this is something I was explaining to Kate yesterday is not knowing, again, not that I know everything about this guy and how he trains, but through watching him train in videos and stuff like that, you could tell when some people have a deep understanding of the actual science behind like the classical conditioning and how we're creating markers and how we're creating words and the importance or lack of importance of the things that you're saying, right? Where I don't necessarily think he has that high of a caliber of that specific knowledge. Now, is it that important? Is it going to ruin everything if you say all of those things? No, but it's just wasted words at that point, right? Or wasted sounds at that point. What else?
Let's see. I was just wondering, like, with Lady Macbeth in particular, like, why did she have to be so tolerant all the time? Like, why is it okay for us to go up to a dog and, like, just smooch it and kiss it? Why can't we respect a dog's space? Like, for him, he was just, like, very much like, oh, get her up in your lap and have her, like, get up to you. Like, what if she doesn't want that?
It's visual for the owner. That's where I mean about, like, he's doing these things because he knows that clientele. And you could tell that guy, all he wanted in life was for him to feel like she loved everybody else as much as he felt like she loved him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it. So that's why he does those things, is because that guy at the end was like, oh my gosh, look at, she's doing these things with my friend and she's doing these things with my colleague and et cetera, et cetera. And you could tell, like, for a second there, he touched on it where he needed to, like, right when that guy had his coworker come in, and you could see he went through the gate and immediately was like, oh my God, and tried to, like, just go right in on her. And you saw he was like, whoa.
Yeah, he was like, stop.
You know, like, you need to, like, chill out. Like, we're not doing that yet, because he understands that's how you're going to get bit, right? So he understands that she doesn't need to be tolerant of everything, but he has to show that she can be tolerant of everything for that reason of making that guy feel good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we do that to some extent. Like, the things he was doing, you were talking about with a fake hand, right? We do those same types of things. The dog is just typically on muzzle, and we do it with our actual hand, right? That's, I mean, any aggressive dog that we get in, the first thing we need to show them, because we need to be able to work with them, is like, hey, those responses aren't working.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I find that I see how far can I get without correcting the behavior of just showing them exactly that. Of, hey, your biting isn't making me go away this time, right? Before I ever add any consequences in for that behavior. So the dog has to be tolerant of it to an extent, right? If there's somebody that needs to work with them. But from there, it's our job. Like we were talking about, the fear aggression is not necessarily directly to people. It's when the dog is in a fearful state of mind, they respond that way. We need to do our best then to read our dog and understand our dog, to know my dog is nervous in this situation, so I need to let them chill out and not have people smother them. Or as you start to do that more and more with a fear-aggressive dog, you start little by little putting them in the situation and making them be a little bit more tolerant as they get more comfortable, right? So I agree with you. She shouldn't need to be that tolerant. I think he had to portray that the dog could be tolerant, though.
Yeah.
Did he, I was like half asleep watching it last night, but did he ever kind of break down the exact of how to meet Lady Macbeth?
No.
No,
Okay.
There's no specific detail.
Okay, we're back again. So did he ever actually show how to introduce her to people?
Right, and you said no.
I don't think so. And this is where, this was kind of sketchy as well. He was showing how to do it when he was saying, like, you got to hold the leash and tell her no. And also, all of his no's he was giving the dog were for, like, nothing. They were, like, preemptive no's, right?
Yeah.
Kate even said at one point, she was like, he's saying no before the dog even made the mistake.
Yeah, his timing was, like, so confusing.
It was very, very confusing. And while he was doing that, he kept telling the guy, let her know it's okay. Pet her. Make her feel good, right?
I noticed a lot of that.
I was
and
like,
I just,
oh, man.
yeah, that was very bothersome to me.
Why is that bad, Emily?
Well, it's just reinforcing an unsure state of mind.
Yes.
And like it's also, that's what bothered me about the dopamine thing too, because like you're ramping up something where you should just want them to coexist with it, right? Like, of course you want to build that motivation and drive, but
well, in the dopamine state of mind, the only thing that's different about it, and again, he was unclear on explaining this, so it's not counter conditioning. The reason why it's okay to utilize positive reinforcement when the dog is potentially in an unsure state of mind for counter conditioning is because you're giving rewards for something very specific, right? If we're just loosely hanging out, right, and I'm petting the dog while they're concerned about something and there's no expectation, that's going to reinforce that unsure state of mind. If I am away from that trigger, right, and I am picking a very specific thing that I'm going to give a very clear reward for, like let's say we're working on sits, like a bunch of sits around some new people that my dog's concerned about. That reward is specifically for that sit, right, when I'm giving it. I think praise gets a little bit more unclear because you can't connect praise to a behavior like you can just a reward, right? If I have a marker, like a clicker or a yes or something like that, and the dog sits and I click and then give a reward, or I say yes and give a reward, there's very little fallout that reward is going to be perceived by the dog as a reinforcement for an anxious state of mind, because it's so clear and precise that, like, you sat, you got the reward, you sat, you got the reward. When you're giving praise, because it's like this like extended constant thing that's happening, right? It's not only just happening when the dog is sitting, but then the dog kind of gets up and they're still getting the praise, so then it removes in the dog's head, oh, that wasn't for the sit, that was just for my existence right now, you know? So counter conditioning is okay when you're really, really clearly, precisely attaching that reward to that behavior. The praise is really, really gray, and then the praise mixed with not even for a clear behavior is super, super gray, and that's where you run the fallout of that. You got more things?
We touched on most of these, but like when he's so attached to his dog, he's like, I can't imagine being without her for 3 weeks. Like humanizing the shit out of her. Like she's going to miss him. Like she's going to think about the time she was shot 4 weeks ago. And
well, we see that every day with our clients.
With
though,
our
right?
clients, it's like I get calls all the time and they're deciding between a board and train and a 10 session. And they're like, I can't leave my dog that long. And then like, I just realized like when I leave my dogs, I felt that way. Like when I leave them, I'm like, oh my God, I can't leave them. They're not going to survive without me. And then they're just like snuggling with the pet sitter, or like they don't care that I left. Like dogs, I feel like we don't explain enough how adaptive dogs are. And with like structure and environment, like that adaptive state of mind is so much easier.
Yep.
Did he really say that he going to remember herself getting shot?
No.
He just said
okay.
that he can't imagine her living 3 weeks without her,
Yeah,
without him or something.
She can't physically function without him. Like dogs are so adaptive. Like Nelson could be given away tomorrow to a new home, and if it was loving, he'd be like, okay, cool.
This is fun.
Yeah.
he did describe in great specific detail how they cuddled.
Oh, yeah.
Hips
Yeah,
against
Oh,
my
yeah.
hips.
Her one leg is draped over me, and her other two are like, something that he did.
I'm sorry. When B tries to do that to me, I'm like, no. Like,
get
it's so
off of me.
smothering. Ugh.
Yeah.
In saying that too, I did feel like Jas was like really, he made her out to be a lot more dangerous than like she seemed like par for the course, like things we see pretty often.
Seemed what?
Like par for the course, like like.
I don't either.
Do you guys know par for
Like
the
on
course?
track.
Yeah, like just run a typical fear-based aggression pity, like kind of ramped up. It just very and I felt like had a muzzle been utilized, also like I don't know, I felt like it almost. I love that he's working with this and showing that we can work through it, but also on the flip side of that, I felt like he was making her out to be more dangerous. And if you would have just popped a muzzle on her, and then the next day too, he's like, don't worry, I'll be her friend before I take her. Like,
It's like catering to that client. I feel like
that's
what
100% it.
Want.
100% it. And you got to look past that a little bit because, you know, again, I don't think it's good for television purposes, but like, you know, like I said, we will cater to our clients to an extent, right? But we still make sure they get the information, right? They're going to, just like we talked about how in the send home lessons, we'll fight the fight eventually with the dog. Like we'll fight the fight eventually with the owner too.
I guess I do that too, like to some degree, like at drop-offs, but
they want to know that their dog is in good hands.
Yes.
And I've put myself in that shoes, and if I was dropping off one of my dogs, I would be like neurotic.
Sure.
And
that's
so
fair.
afraid. And if I met with like you and you were calming me down, that would be such a relief.
Yeah. You can't go right in with like the hammer of God of like, you need to change all of these things right away, right? You do have to make them feel comfortable initially. What were we saying? What was the last question you asked? I feel like I had a point on it that I can't remember. The last thing you said.
Did I say like his dogs are a lot more adaptable than we think that they are?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I tell people all the time, like, if I really want to, like, make it very apparent to them, I was like, if I died tomorrow, right, and my dogs suddenly started living with you, like, they wouldn't give a shit, like, after, like, a day, right? As soon as they're moved into that new environment, they're gonna adapt, just like you were saying. Just like we see with the board and trains, right? Sure. A couple days in, and they start realizing we're training them, we're working them, we're doing socialization with them, right? We're in control of all of these different things. They're not sitting there dwelling on everything else that's going on. And if they are overwhelmed by anything, it's not due to like, where's my owner? It's just due to, wow, this is a hectic place. What's going on?
They're in the moment all the time. They're never like thinking about their past or traumas. Like definitely can affect the dog, but they're not specifically thinking about those traumas like humans do.
For sure.
Why do they have those pictures then of dogs who like owners have died and the dogs are like laying on the graves?
It's just like Bunny and the Buttons.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that dogs can be triggered by certain situations, right? I mean, look at, you know, if a dog has a rough training session, right, and they come back in the next training session, you could tell they're a little on edge, like, oh, I don't know, last time wasn't so fun or whatever. I think certain situations can create those triggers, and I think there's something to be said about, like, let's use the direct example I've seen a couple times of like the police canine or whatever that's laying next to the casket of the, you know, the fallen police officer, whatever, right, or the military dog or whatever, and them laying there, like, and I don't know anything about this obviously, but like I would assume that there is some sort of like something the dog can sense that like, hey, I'm sensing some sort of presence that my owner is kind of here right now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That would be an assumption of mine. I think as far as them like laying next to the tombstones and stuff like that, like a
perfectly timed photo.
I think it's probably just a perfectly timed photo though. Yeah. So, and then I think they could also probably tell, like in a situation like that, like we are all emotional and stuff going into it. So if we're taking a dog there and we're in a super emotional state of mind, the dog's going to be like, something's different right now. And a lot of dogs can't handle that. Yeah. Right. So they might start kind of like breaking down a little bit from the standpoint of like, my owner's unstable right now. This is a weird situation. I don't know what's going on. I'm really concerned.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess like the smell aspect too, like they can probably like.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know how like embalming works or anything, if that like totally eliminates that, but like it's kind of a morbid topic.
Will I still smell like me when I'm dead?
Will my dog lay on top of my casket? That's my goal in life.
Honeycomb will not. She will care less.
She'll be like,
what else is on your 3 pages?
Well, my end notes, I had like a couple glasses of wine, so it says,
nice.
What is his criteria? What? Sloppy. Confusion. Letting dogs climb on you? Not everyone deserves or needs to love your dog. And
it's a good point.
Yeah. Like, my dog doesn't need to be so tolerant that everybody in the world can come up to my dog and pet him. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I like Wang Bridget's thought process there.
I like these very detailed notes.
Yes, very nice.
Confusion.
Was that all on the 3 pages? Did you skip stuff?
I think we went over most of it. I said like the thing about the alpha male, and then confidence isn't everything. I don't know what that meant. Walking into the dog.
Explain to me what you mean by the like alpha male trainer kind of thing.
So there is this certain breed of trainer that's just like dominant, very dominant. You have to be dominant over the dog. So it's alpha male. And that was a big thing with shelters are very predominantly female. So all the females would be like, oh, these men in this training, like they're just trying to control the dog. Like you have to go through the doorway before the dog can go through the doorway. And it's just like there are some trainers that are like that. Like
I totally agree
very
with you.
dominant. And that's like that kind of training just doesn't sit well with me.
Sure.
Yes.
So usually when because I totally see trainers out there that I feel like are just like, come on, dude, like don't be so douchey, right? Did you feel that way about his training or about him as a person?
I felt that way about him as a person. Okay. I don't know his training well enough. I only saw one episode, but the first like 5 minutes, it was just like he was like that, like very alpha male, like I will lead you and you will listen to me kind of deal.
Sure.
And that's off-putting. Yeah,
no, I would completely agree. Like the trainers I see doing it, I'm super off-put by that. The only reason why I feel like with him, like I see that in his personality, not as much as his training, just because it does seem like he cares a lot about the motivation of the dog and the dog really wanting to do the things, you know? I think a lot of the way he was giving the commands and stuff seemed very much like that, which I would agree with. I don't know if his training style per se is that much like that though.
Yeah, like my brother was recently here for Christmas and he's like, I could do what you're doing. I could be a dog trainer. I'm a strong, big man annoying. And I could like walk in. Oh my God. I could do that. And I was like,
That's such a dickly thing to say though, you know? Like we'll see clients that do that too sometimes. Like I used to get that a lot where it's like people just you know, like people have this assumption. It's like, you know, oh, so like all I had to do was get an e-collar or all I had to do was get a prong collar. It's like, did you literally just like look past every little thing that I just did, like with that tool or before I had that tool and like the skill to like implement it and stuff?
The foundation.
And I'll still get super offended by that, like when people say things like that. And then to have it said in like such a condescending way, like somebody that doesn't even like know anything about what you do and have them come in and like try to say it like that, that's really, really annoying.
Totally.
Anything else on that list?
We talked about most of it, like petting, tons of petting during stressful situations, and how that's negatively affecting the dog.
Sure.
And how Lady Macbeth reacted, and he's like, "Oh my God, she bit me." It's like, of course she bit you. We're holding her when she's reacting. Like,
and like literally his face was like 3 inches from hers.
The look on his face, like you would have thought, like he was betrayed.
She shot him.
He pooped in his Cheerios.
Right. He was very upset.
I was like, dogs are still dogs. Like, you can train them all you want, but like you can't. They're not always going to be 100% reliable in every situation you put them into. Yeah.
Big time. I mean, there's every dog has their limitations. Like even Vinny, like there's things that I do to him that he doesn't like, and he'll like tell me he doesn't like those things. Like he'll like, you know, or like let out a little, you know, little air snap or something, and it's like I know what he can tolerate and know what he can't tolerate. I'm not going to be like picking him up and carrying him around or like whipping him all over the place, or if I get him hyped and like, you know, with Vera, sometimes I'll like grab her cheeks and like, you know, if I do that to him, he's going to try to bite me. Like,
you know, your dogs. Like I did that with Minnow. I like hype him up so much. And I know that like when to stop, like when to respect his.
And that's okay, right? Like why, like you, to your point, like why do dogs need to tolerate all of that kind of stuff? Like why can't I just understand my dog and understanding, and another positive to this show, you know, back from digging on him a little bit there, was at the very beginning of the episode, he said something along the lines of, if you could understand where the aggression is coming from, you could understand how to work around it, right? And that is a very accurate thing, I think, to the extent of like, if we could figure out and make the aggressive responses a little bit more predictable, we could be more prepared for them to either address it if it's something that needs to be addressed from like a correctional standpoint, or just understand what situations to not put the dog in to make sure they don't rehearse that behavior in the first place. Yeah. You know? Because that's all of it. No matter what anybody says, you're not fixing aggression. No, I don't think any dog, you're fixing it. You're understanding the dog well enough to be able to build incrementally their tolerance to certain things, and then understand how you need to live or incorporate this dog into certain situations, so that you prevent the issues from happening in the first place. Yeah. Right. I think that's literally all of it. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah, there's like a huge trend on TikTok right now, and it's like, I don't know if you know Pudgy, the Chihuahua.
we do not. I am not a TikToker.
So
I heard, are you doing Miracle Canine's TikTok right now?
No,
Oh, that's upsetting.
we haven't set it up yet, but
Oh, I thought you guys did one the other day.
I don't know. I don't know what Paige has got going on there.
You guys should work on that. I want you to be in charge of our TikTok.
But Pudgy, he just goes up. This teenage boy just goes up to this dog and like purposely irritates it, and Pudgy's just like, and he purposely does this in all of his things, and people think it's like hilarious. And you're going and like fucking with your dog, and it's just why?
Like, I could literally do that with Vinny and probably be like a viral success because it would be hilarious to watch. But like, how horrible of a person am I to just like annoy my dog like, all the time like that?
It's like a dance mom, except it's like you get addicted to making your dog upset all the time. Like, why?
Yeah. I was gonna say something. Oh, that's like Josh. Remember when we did those like reaction videos? Mm-hmm. We did a couple of like YouTube reaction videos where I Google searched like aggressive dog viral videos or something, and like some of them were like legitimately like, whoa, like you actually need to stop doing that because somebody's gonna get seriously hurt. And then you look at these little dogs and you think like, oh, like what's the worst that's gonna happen? It's just a little dog. I had a client that had a mini dachshund that was like this big that bit her so hard right on the finger right here that she had to have hand reconstruction surgery because it like literally separated the bone at the joint.
We had little dogs that one of a kind that we would have to like take giant like towels and like wear like gloves to get out, and like they would try to bite you every time. Like it's no, little dogs bite hard too.
They're no joke.
They're still dogs. Like people treat them differently, but
yeah. Okay. So now that we're like doing this here, kind of again here, I do want to talk a little bit about the actual training that you have done with your little dog. So like it seems like with some of the dogs, you've kind of followed our program to an extent with, but there's variations with it, obviously. Yeah. What hurdles have you found with like your little dogs in trying to train them in the way you would train like a larger dog, if any, and how have you kind of worked through those?
Spork is such a difficult dog to train. He is so shut down so easily that I don't use corrections like all the time. So like I'm consistent. I try to be as consistent, but for example, the other day I wanted to start clicker training with him because he's so auditory that I think like marking with a clicker would be good for him. And I tried the clicker, and he's absolutely terrified of the clicker. Running away, freaking out, screaming.
Really? Like just from clicking it?
Just from so shut down. Like when he doesn't take food, I know that he's not in a learning state of mind.
Sure.
So I have to be like softer on him, but I don't know where to be tougher and get away with it where he's like learning because he's so scared and so easily shut down.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing that I've seen with him is like he just like with Deli, right? Like he'll do like he'll get scared of something, it seems like, and he'll act like you like killed him.
Yeah.
Right? And like not literally nothing happened, right? Like he'll be literally in the pen and like a noise will happen or something. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So two things that I always feel like I'm interested by when I see dogs like that, because I don't necessarily think that's a little dog specific issue. I think that's more just like the type of dog that he is one, the idea that dogs determine what is aversive or what is reinforcing, right? So, you know, though in our mind with a lot of dogs, we'll look at like the dog's daily kibble should be the most reinforcing thing if we're feeding them properly. And I think with 9 out of 10 dogs, that is the case, right? They're just as motivated by that as they would be anything else. I've definitely seen dogs where, whether it's from a time crunch thing or they're just so nervous that you need something a little bit higher of value. Like we talked about with Charlie getting the additional treats. Was it Charlie or Enzo? Enzo getting the additional treats with him, even though his feeding was very good. It's not like he was being overfed or anything. He needed that little extra reinforcing push. Whether it was with when I worked with Letty, how I went to the store, and this is a very, very easily shut down dog. I went to the store and bought like chicken strip things and used those for training because they were the most like reinforcing thing in the world. I think some dogs need a little extra with that. There was so when I first started training dogs, We never really used the dog's daily kibble for training. That was actually something I learned from Tyler Muto when I first went out to see him, and he started showing me how with his board and trains, they would prep the food at the beginning of the day, leave it above the crate, and use it throughout the day for the training, right? Which was a great idea at the time, but before that, we were exclusively using either Red Barn or Happy Howie's. Are you guys familiar with those at all?
I know what Red Barn is.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're dog food rolls, right? So it looks like a big sausage, right? And it's intended to be, it's an actual dog food, right? But it's significantly higher value. It's kind of moist. It's, do you hate that word?
No, it's just funny.
You had a funny face when you said it.
You say it very intense. Moist.
Moist. So, you know, it's kind of like that, right? It's meaty, it's hearty, whatever. So we would take this shit and we would buy it in bulk off of Chewy. Like we would buy like 15, 20 rolls of it at a time, and we exclusively use that with our board and trains, which looking back on it, like we didn't do it as Heights Canine, but we did it with the company I worked for. And I was like, man, the amount of money this guy's probably losing on like providing food for all these dogs through this is insane. But anyways, so we would use that, and I will say there was a astronomical difference in the dog's motivation utilizing that stuff versus utilizing the dog's daily kibble, right? I think, again, most dogs, the kibble is more than enough, but some dogs, you need something higher value, right? So I guess then equating this to Spork, do you utilize treats with him, or is it primarily just his food and stuff?
I use a lot of treats, and something that I felt like I've really been trying to work with him the last couple months is teaching him tricks.
Sure.
It has been really helpful because it's like a fun training.
Emily said she was doing that with Bee or Honeycomb, right?
Bee. Yeah. Teaching tricks is like a great way to engage your dog, play with your dog, have that relationship. So I taught Spork to jump over my leg. And it was just like I would just say over, and now he's just like hops over my leg, he gets a treat. Hops over my leg, gets a treat. And then I transition into those down stays and bed stays, and he's had a much easier transition after playing. Opening up the training session by playing with him a little. Yeah, definitely.
So from a reinforcement standpoint then, like highest value stuff. And you'll find that even with like high value treats, he'll like refuse them sometimes.
Yeah, so the clicker, like I sent you the video of the clicker training, I had like beef treats and I clicked the clicker and he was so terrified of it. He was just like sitting there like not looking at me, won't make eye contact. He turns away from me and like won't look at me, and I'm just like, what did I do? Like,
is he a pretty food motivated dog in general?
Yes, he loves food. He is a huge there for dinner, the first one there for dinner. Yeah, always scavenging around the floor to see if there's kibbles.
So Gary Wilkes, are you guys familiar with him?
Yes.
No.
He created the bonker. Like he's the guy that invented it, and he was one of the original pioneers of like clicker training and stuff with dogs. So like him and Karen Pryor, they used to do seminars together. Yeah. Like before Karen was like 100% positive only. Back in I think he said it was like the 80s or something. But anyways, he does clicker training, right? And he always talks a lot about like there are dogs that the clicker is like terrifying to them for whatever reason. And he talks about muting the clicker. So take a towel, right? And see one of two things: put it in your pocket and click it in your pocket, or wrap a towel around it and click it through the towel. And it'll dampen the sound enough where the dog isn't too scared of it. And then you go through the process of charging the click. So were you just trying to implement it into your training, or were you trying to actually like charge the clicker?
I was trying to implement it into my training to mark exactly when his behavior was good, because I have trouble with like the timing. So I thought that would be good, and it ended up not being.
So another thing is, until you have, if you're going to be utilizing like a specific marker, like a clicker or a yes mark or anything like that. I was talking about this with Krista the other day, I think. Technically speaking, before you ever implement it into training, we have to create the positive association with that thing, because the problem is if you don't have it, and if it's either a neutral sensation or if the dog is nervous of it, you're actually going to create the association of something negative happening when the dog is doing the correct thing, right? So what you do is, what I would do with him is I would start with it in the towel, and I would spend a week literally taking him out for a session, get 25 to 50 treats, right, or pieces of food, click, give a treat. Click, give a treat. Click, give a treat. And literally just do that over and over and over and over again with zero expectation until you start seeing when you click, he goes,
has a positive,
right? And has the positive association with that. From there, once you have your marker charged, once you start implementing it in, you could teach anything. And this goes back to the free shaping that we were talking about, right? And I could show you with Vinny or something, like I said. Free shaping only works if you have a marker that has a positive association with it, right? Because if not, you could say good or yes all day long, but that word is meaningless to the dog. Just like you can say no all day long, but unless it has a negative association, that word is meaningless to the dog. So I would spend the time conditioning in that click first and making sure that like when he hears that click, it's like, boom, on it, got it, right? From there, you're going to see it like improve your training like 20-fold with the things that you're working on with him, right? But the other side of the equation, outside of the positive side, is the dog perceives what is aversive, right? And I use this example sometimes of I've seen dogs that the vibrate function on the e-collar is like the end of the world. It's like literally the most awful, horrendous thing that's ever existed. I've seen dogs that we talk a lot about, the tone of your voice doesn't really matter, but when you increase or decrease that tone, the dog responds differently to those things. The prong collar, the e-collar, any of those types of things. So, I try to not get too caught up on the tools themselves, which I think you are doing, which is awesome, where you're not necessarily implementing like e-collar corrections for everything or leash corrections for everything or whatever it is. I think that you're looking at like what is enough to get the point across to him in this moment, right? If you need to correct for something, is you giving just like a hey or a no or whatever it may be, is that aversive enough to him where he's understanding and changing his behavior without being over the top and shutting him down, right? Yeah. Because if the philosophies stay the same of I'm still going to give a correction in this moment, but that correction doesn't necessarily mean an e-collar correction or this or that, then that's going to work. And that's a lot of the reason why sometimes if we start seeing a dog that's too responsive to the e-collar, we'll go down to just a 1, not because they're feeling the 1, but because the no mark in itself is aversive enough to the dog where it's altering their behavior, So looking at stuff like that, I think is important. Yeah. Okay. So you were talking about, with Spork, so he's really sensitive. You've had some issues with, needing to alter the way you're correcting him for things. Outside of that, what other things have you noticed as far as training some of the smaller dogs that you're working with and stuff that either stay the same or change or are bigger or smaller hurdles that you've noticed?
Small dogs are definitely different. I completely believe that working with them is different. And this all could be bullshit, but like in my mind, like I understand little dog body language so well because I have it and I see it every day. And not that big dog don't have their own body language, but like little dogs, like I know them, like I can pinpoint them. And I feel like because they're little, people are always softer on them. So when little dogs come in for training, I start a little softer because that's, if you're going like right off the bat way too rough, I feel like they're just going to shut down.
Do you think it's because they're more susceptible to things like spatial pressure and everything because we're so much larger than they are?
Yeah, and that people are always picking them up and holding them and kissing them, and they're always around, and they do know the fact that they're so little.
Sure.
So I think it's just like a different approach, and that could just be just all in my head, but I really believe that.
When you say that their body language is different, right? Like then, you'll notice things that are different than say with a larger dog. Like what do you mean by that?
Like I just know like the cowering, like when dogs come in and they're cowering or something, when it's okay. I mean, for me, when I know, I guess that, lost my train of thought here, but like
that's okay. Like when it's okay to be softer with them in those types of situations?
When it's okay to be softer with them and approach them. Like with bigger dogs, because they are bigger, I'm not going to approach them the same way that I would with little dogs because I have more comfortability with little dogs because they're smaller. So it's like what you said. It's like, what's the worst that could happen?
Sure.
Like they're not going to like maul me and kill me. So I'm more comfortable with smaller dogs. As I'm learning to be a trainer and training bigger dogs.
I think that's interesting to look at from the standpoint of, like with the little dog, even though obviously like we talk about what's the worst that can happen. Like obviously that lady had like a serious injury on her hand, but that's a lot different than a dog like literally being in a position where they can kill you. Right. I think that's interesting to look at then the behavioral side of things of if these little dogs are showing aggression and equating this back to the canine intervention, how he was talking about they typically run people off or whatever it may be. And a lot of getting past that is showing them that doesn't work, right? I think you could do that much easier and much more effectively with a little dog where if they're kind of hiding in a corner, snapping or growling or whatever it may be, I can continue to approach and not be in like a fearful or anxious state of mind myself.
Exactly.
And then once I am able to make that contact, right, and get the dog past, like, okay, this isn't working, be significantly more gentle with them through that process and kind of give a degree of comfort. Like it sounds like you're kind of like explaining with that.
Give a little scritch. It goes a long way.
A little scritch.
I can immediately see dogs, like little dogs, relax their body.
Sure.
Once they know I'm not going to hurt them. So like Rita, my little foster now, she's so fearful but like giving her a little scritch, she's like all confident and like starts running around doing zoomies and.
That is interesting. I guess I never really thought as much about how the little dogs, like if they're having those like fear aggressive responses, it is kind of coming from a different place, right? Like those insecurities and stuff are because we've built them up like to be so big and confident or whatever it may be, this false sense of confidence through a lot of the things we do with them and treating them like toys and carrying them and putting them in bags and all of this kind of stuff, where once you put them down on the ground and they realize like how intimidating everything else actually is, you do have to have a little bit of a different approach with that. That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, like very popular, like Chihuahua's got a bad rap because like I feel like it started with like Paris Hilton and
Taco Bell.
Yeah, like holding the dog all the time, having the dog in your purse all the time, and you're creating this like sense of the dog can't be without you. It's like separation anxiety. So when they are on the ground, they're like, what is going on?
Yeah, and you remove any sort of teaching of them being able to explore their surroundings.
Yeah, and
like if you're holding them all the time, like how are they going to be able to like walk up to this tripod that's literally like 50 times bigger than they are, you know, and have them be able to like check it out and explore it and stuff. They're used to seeing all of these things and being managed through all of these things, but never being able to explore it.
Yeah, and they're definitely more prone to like abuse because you can easily hurt a little dog way more than you could hurt a bigger dog.
Sure.
So some little dogs are more prone to being abused, kicked, like because you can pick them up, you can throw them. You know, horrible things happen every day. So they know that their size. They know their size, and I think they are aware of that. So helping them feel confident with their size. Like I'm a smaller person, and I know that like Shaquille O'Neal could pick me up and throw me.
Sure.
You know, so it's just gaining confidence, being small and still advocating and learning.
For sure.
I feel like even abuse set aside, like a big dog's not having to worry about like your feet, you know, like how easy would it be to just accidentally kick a little dog? You know, I'm sure you've probably done it with that.
Step on them,
so
roll over onto them.
So like feet alone are probably something that they're trying to navigate and they might be fearful of.
Yeah, I mean, you figure your foot is as big as them sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and we'll see a lot of little dogs that have feet aggression issues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
the one thing that they have access to right away on, like, just roll, like Justin rolls over Nelson in bed all the time, and I always just like have to like punch Justin and rescue Nelson from under his like limp body. And
oh my god!
Nelson's just sitting there like, I'm gonna die now.
Yeah,
I can't breathe. I'm
and
being crushed.
He just screams, and that's like, poor Nelson.
Yeah, I think there are, you know, we try to, you know, make the correlation that all dogs are kind of the same to some extent, but like, though the training methods themselves and the philosophies I think are the same, which is kind of what we're getting at here, like between the like, you know, if we're correcting for something, maybe we're not using the same tools or the same intensities in certain areas, but like the methods are kind of the same, the philosophies. But there are different hurdles that they'll face as far as the things that make them scared or the things that make them feel confident or, you know, them socializing and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, and still I have to get better about socializing my small dogs because
Sure.
it's like makes me neurotic right now. Like
it makes me nervous too. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't let right? I don't want to say I don't typically like having little dogs like out in our socials, right?
Yeah.
I try to keep the groups very, very controlled, where like only dogs I really 100% trust, or dogs that are not super massive or whatever it may be. Because I mean, just like the situation with Justin, if two big dogs are playing and just collapse on top of a big dog, like that can be a serious problem.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. There's a degree of being more careful and more aware with small dogs.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. I feel good about that ending there. I think we wrap things up. Bridget, do you have any other secret notebooks hidden anywhere?
That's it.
This has been our longest podcast yet. We're at 2.5 hours. Very exciting. I really wanted to get to 3, but ain't going to happen today. So, all right. You know where to find us. We already did it. We're going to end this now. Goodbye.